ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 8th Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting. Can I have roll call, Shannon, please?
Messina.
Here.
Fleming. Here. Ingalls.
Here.
Tripp.
Here.
Mandel. Rumpler.
Here, but I still hearing the music. Oh, there you go. I'm here.
Ward.
Okay, thank you. Can you please stand for the pledge? Appreciate it. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we have approval of the August 11th meeting minutes, please.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
I have first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 At this time, we're going to do the, Envision Coeur d'Alene update. Hillary?
I'll just do a brief update. So good evening, commissioners, and then if Sean wants to chime in or if you have any specific questions. But so for the commission, I think you're all well aware of our progress on the project. So a few weeks ago, it was actually the week after our last commission meeting, we had the 6 focus groups had meetings, and we also met with our community advisory committee. And so we're making some great progress reviewing the policy language. We're also working on the land use alternatives. And now we're working with the traffic subconsultant and KMPO on traffic modeling. And that'll help us evaluate the alternatives and come up with traffic mitigation strategies. We're currently working on scheduling a leadership briefing that'll be in October, and that'll be Planning Commission, City Council, and CDA 2030 board members, as well as department heads from city departments. So things are on track. Things are looking good. So
It's been a long time.
It has. It's a big project.
Yeah, great. All right, thanks. Appreciate it. And back to you, Hillary, for staff comments.
Okay, great. So for our October 13th meeting, we have one multi-part development request. It's an annexation PUD subdivision. And then we're also looking at bringing forward just some housekeeping changes to the zoning code. So
Excellent.
that'll be the meeting.
Good. Thanks,
That's all we
Hillary.
have. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Any commissioner comments at this time?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. On one of these items here tonight, I received a notice from the city telling me about the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's because I'm adjacent to the property. I just clarify this is not I don't believe it is a conflict, but I would, appreciate the city's comments.
There's no conflict if you don't have a financial interest in
Very
the
good.
project.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? No? At this time, and I don't know if anyone is in the audience or, I don't know, we have anyone on Zoom, Hillary, for public comments for anything besides
We
what
have,
we're,
yes. let's see
public
here.
hearings tonight?
Let's check. We have 5 attendees on Zoom, so.
And is that for the public hearings, or is it for just public comment?
I'm unsure. We can send out a message
Okay.
to them on chat, but if anyone is at home on Zoom, if you have the hand raise function, if you want to do that as well, let us know if you're interested in speaking during public comments or the public hearing items. And I don't know how quickly, I don't see any hand. Oh, actually, no, we do have a few. So we have Connie Kruger and Chris Cox. So we'll need to grant them permission to speak.
For public comment at this time, or is it,
I'm unclear. I think it might be public comment.
okay. So who raised their hand first?
Connie Kruger?
This is Connie. I just raised my hand for the public hearing. So
Okay. Which public hearing, Connie? Oh, sorry, you're on both of them. I'm sorry, you're the applicants. Okay, yep, sorry. We'll make you panelists. Thank you.
thanks.
And then the other one is Chris Cox.
Yeah, so I'm not here to comment. I submitted an email to be read during the meeting, and I'm just watching. I'm interested in the outcome of the zoning change on 2926 South Howard, I believe, or North Howard, I believe is the address.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. That'll be it?
Yes, that's all for now.
Okay, thanks, Hillary. At this time, we're going to open up the public hearing for the items. The first item is ZC-4-20. It's proposed zone change from R8 to R17, and the address is 3520 North 15th Street. Mike's going to give us a little rundown.
Do I have to share the screen, or is it automatically?
You'll need to share the screen.
Okay,
All right, good evening, Commissioners.
good
This is-
evening.
It's a public hearing for item ZZ-4-20, application by Northwest Solutions Investment Group, LLC, represented by Connie Kruger with Stonehenge Development and Government. They're requesting a zone change from R8 to R17 zoning district. Property is located at 3520 North 15th Street, and legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on August 22nd, 2020, and all other required notifications have been made. Here's a location map indicating where this property is located. It's located in the northeast part of the city. You can see this is 15th Street. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property, highlighted in red. This property consists of 3 and 4 unit apartment buildings. It was built in 1993 under the cluster housing ordinance. That ordinance was repealed in 2007, and we do not have a pocket housing or an infill ordinance at this time. This is a bird's eye view of the property looking north. There are 4 findings that must be met in order for a zone change to be approved. Finding B8 through B11. First finding is finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The subject property is located in the northeast Prairie area, and pockets of higher density housing and multifamily units are appropriate and compatible areas as indicated by the comprehensive plan. It's also in the stable established area, and these areas are where the character of the neighborhoods have largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land uses are not expected to change greatly within the planning period. This slide indicates comprehensive plan goals and objectives. The full list is on page 5 and 6 of your staff report. Objectives such as community design, building image and diversity, neighborhoods, and city services, capital improvements. The next finding is finding B9, that the public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. City staff from engineering, streets, water, fire, parks, and wastewater departments have reviewed the application request in regards to public utilities and public facilities. Each department has indicated there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request. The next finding is finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. The site is generally flat with a slight drop in elevation towards the southwest part of the property. There are no topographical or physical constraints that would make the subject property unsuitable to change the zoning from R8 to R17. Here's a topographic map overlaid over the property aerial photograph. You can see this is relatively flat up here, and the property slopes south towards the southwest. Here are some site photos of the property. This is looking north along 15th Street. This is on the southwest corner looking northeast. This is on the center part of the property looking north. This is on the center of the property looking west. And this is on the center of the property looking east. The last finding is finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. The city engineer has indicated that the applicant states that no changes are planned for the property. However, if in the future the property is redeveloped to a maximum density, traffic could double. But considering the size of the subject property, the increase increase in traffic would be negligible when compared to the total traffic on 15th Street, which exceeds 9,500 trips daily. Here's a zoning map indicating the surrounding zoning. To the north, we have R8, to the east R8, to the south R12, and ag suburban in the county to the west. The R17 zoning district is intended as a medium to high-density residential district that permits a mix of housing types. Permits single-family, duplex, and multifamily housing. This district is for established in those areas that are not suitable for low-density residential due to the proximity to more intense types of land uses. The R7 district is also appropriate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer between arterial streets and low-density residential districts. The following is a list of principal uses that are permitted in the R17 district: single-family housing, duplex housing, multifamily housing, to mention a few. To see the full list of R17 district information, please look at 13 and 14 of your staff report. Here's a land use map indicating the surrounding land uses. You've got single-family to the north, mobile homes to the east, duplexes to the south, and single-family to the east, to the west. Here's some zone changes that happened in the vicinity. In 1982, there was a zone change from R8 to R3 in the northwest corner. And in the south here was R12 to C17 in 1982. And then in 1992, there was a zone change from R12 to R8 PUD. The decision point before you tonight is to provide a recommendation to City Council regarding the proposed zone change from R8 to R17 on approximately 4.26 acres. You'll need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions of Mike at this time? Oh,
Mike, what are the closest other R17s to this property?
They're quite a distance away. I don't have the map up. Let me see if I can get to the locational map. The closest R17 is down in this area, and there's some over in this area.
Very good. And we mentioned in here that there was a cluster housing regulations that this fell under at one time, but we repealed that in 2007. Why did we repeal that? You recall?
I don't recall exactly why the cluster housing was repealed. I know they wanted to change it to the pocket housing model, so I'm not for sure the exact reasons for that repeal.
Thank you.
But pocket housing was approved, and then that was repealed. And we currently have no infill code on right now.
Oh, John, sorry.
Mike, could you pull up the aerial view, the one that has the topographic map? That one would work. There's one that's even more out-zoomed from that, but on page 11 of the staff report, it says the properties to the west and north of the subject site are residential land uses with single-family dwellings on them. And they don't, if you expand out, there's another photo. They look,
Yeah, that may be a typo. There could be multifamily to the north. Yeah, it looks like that. There was one single family here, but
okay, so
there's
it's
some multifamily to the
a
north.
little bit of,
Yes.
a little bit of, okay, thanks.
Thanks for catching that.
Okay. Oh, Lynn?
My question already.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Mike. I have no one signed up to speak. Anybody out in Zoom?
The only one we have is the applicant's representative.
Okay,
So,
are they
Connie
here?
Kruger. She's on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Was that Nancy?
Connie.
Who is it?
Connie Kruger.
Connie. Connie Kruger?
Looks like we need to give her the opportunity to talk. I'll see if I can unmute her. Okay. Connie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Right.
perfect.
I
Okay.
just need to swear.
What I'd like to do tonight is to do a screen
Connie,
share.
hold on. I just need to swear you in. If you can virtually raise your hand, I guess. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Um,
And Connie, are you going to share? Do you have a PowerPoint? Because we can stop sharing our screen so you can share.
Screen share, is that okay? Yes, actually I do. Hello. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share here with my presentation. All right, here we go. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight on behalf of my client. The property owner is, not sure how that's showing up on your side, is Northwest Solutions Investment Group. And this is an LLC, and the owner is actually Rennie Ross of that LLC, which you know on Wisdom Development. And tonight we have a lot of different topics that we can cover. A lot of them were already covered in the staff presentation, so I'll probably skip quickly through some of these. But again, as you're aware, this property is located on the east side of 115th Street, and this is a 3-family subdivision. It's about 4.263 acres, and you can see that we actually have quite a bit of this property that is currently devoted to stormwater systems. See that?
And
Primarily 3- and 4-plex buildings. I think
Connie?
there was a prior photo shown where we saw.
Connie, may
may
we interrupt you? Your audio is cutting out a little bit, so you might have to speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. As you move closer to the east side of the development, you pick up the 3- and 4-plexes that are in that area. So they're all kind of within courtyard areas, very nicely landscaped. It's really a nice development. It's something that the owner has no immediate plans to redevelop. The reason that we're looking for is from an R8 to an R17. And we see that with the R17 that it allows for medium high density residential, it allows for more mixture of housing types. There are 3 reasons why we're requesting this. And the first is that this is now a non-conformity, and the owner has had difficulty in obtaining initial refinancing because the use is no longer allowed in the R8 zone district. And also, if it were ever to be destroyed, he would have difficulty reconstructing it in the way that it's built now. And the model that he has right now works very well for him with 4-plexes. The other is that the property is located on a major collector on 15th, and there are a lot of high density or medium to high density housing developments that are within the area, and so kind of highlighting the area. And then the fact that the infrastructure is available now for the current use and future use. As to the non-conforming status, I've already hit that the majority of this is triplexes and 4-plex buildings. There's a table showing you a comparison of the R8 and the R17 zone districts, but I've also included the R12 so that there's an understanding of why we are seeking the R12 zoning. And that's primarily because, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, we are allowed the multifamily housing that currently exists. And with the R8 and with the R12, we're limited to single-family or to duplex housing. So again, it would allow us to continue with the model that exists. As to the location, this is a map from Campio, and it shows our location on the major collector, which is in purple there, that's 15. And you can kind of see the backbone of Kathleen and 90 and Way, and how this collector street fits very nicely with the system of arterial streets and allows for nice traffic flow. It can absorb a volume of traffic from our development. And I believe that the staff mentioned that the city engineer had also noted that absorbing any future traffic from redevelopment would not be an issue on. This is a field inventory of other projects that are within the area that are higher density. And you can see that we have gone out and counted the number of units and looked at what the zoning is and what the actual density is on this one. And so with this, you see a range of anywhere from about 10 dwelling units per acre up to close to 17 dwelling units per acre. So again, all of these things are happening right along 15 or maybe just a block off of 15. There were actually quite a few more multifamily higher density developments. We didn't catalog everything in the area, just ones that were fairly visible and accessible. So you can see we have quite a variety of housing in the area. If we go back and look at the transitioning land use map, you can see the numbers 1 through 6, and those are representative of where those projects are located. They're along 15. So again, you can see this kind of dispersion of higher density housing, how it's dispersed, but basically. As to infrastructure, our primary access is onto a major collector. This is mentioned basically the road infrastructure, curb gutter, stormwater, sidewalks are all in place on 15. We have great surrounding access, which has been mentioned, and then also going into the fact that major interchanges are within 1 mile of the property at 4th Street and 99. A higher density project would allow us to serve the surrounding community. Water, sewer, hydrants are all currently provided and in place on the property. And, again, we have no plans to develop at this time or redevelop, but if we were to do that, as infrastructure is present. And we've also heard from the various departments of the city who have not expressed concerns with the rezone. As to the effects of the rezone, the effect of the amendment on the subject property and property rights and value and character of the neighboring properties. Basically, we believe that this is consistent with the area that we're in. In fact, it would be much more consistent than if we were on a access road system and not within more of an arterial environment. We also know that there's other high density that's occurring in the area. And again, there's no immediate impact, but again, we will recognize that if there were future reconstruction, there is that possibility for increasing noise, traffic, utility needs. But again, we believe this to be an area it's compatible with. And if the amendment is not granted, the property owner will struggle with financing, and they would not be able to reconstruct this in accordance with their current investment. So we think that this allows for the property to be redeveloped consistently with other properties in this corridor. The comprehensive plan, as staff has mentioned, supports pockets of higher density housing in multiple units. So in summary, we believe we're in a transitioning area. This would allow for multifamily housing to blend with that. It's located in a great area with great access, and allows this owner to exercise similar property rights to what others have, because we do have other higher densities within that area, and allows for that refinancing and reconstruction in accordance to the investment. And we see this as being consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So that is what I have, and I am here to answer any questions that may come up.
Any questions? No? No questions, Connie?
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you then. I'm going to close the public.
There aren't any other people
No.
signed in?
Yeah, right.
And then there's no one else on your sign-in
No,
sheet?
I have
either?
no one
Okay.
on my list.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
nope, it's just the
I'm going
applicant's
to close
representative.
public testimony on this and bring it to the commissioners for discussion and a motion.
I realize that R17 is kind of leapfrogging ahead of what's happening around it, but I can see how the local developments are either at the end of their lifespan or moving towards something different. So I understand why they're doing this. I think that bringing into conformance is important. And they're anticipating evolution to go more vertically and more dense. And so that helps us with our sprawl issue. So I don't disagree with this. What I would like to put a little plug in is for affordable housing. Because it is such a collector, it is proximity to the city, and really like to see this. And I know Connie, that's one of her things. So I think this would be a viable solution.
I totally agree with you, Lynn, and I think we've seen a lot of infill projects in the last months that we've been here, and we're going to see more, and I think infill projects come in different shapes and sizes and income levels, what you could argue that River's Edge is infill rather than sprawling out. We're going to see other projects today that are infill in nature. There are different price points, but I think we don't have a guarantee that this is affordable housing. I think it's likely to be more so than some of the other projects, and I think we're seeing a good blend. But I think that infill projects. I'm an advocate for quality infill projects, and I think that's going to be kind of the future of Coeur d'Alene as we see our viability. And every time we fill in rather than have this Pac-Man game of chomping up the Rathdrum Prairie, infill is a good thing. And we have to, in order to preserve some of these open areas, like the Rathdrum Prairie or other areas, we have to tolerate a little bit more density. So I'm supportive.
I think it's premature. I believe there's a growth that takes place. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just don't think the time is right. This develops your donut hole that you talk about. In time, the evolution will get there, but this is, to me, quite a jump. And if we jump here, we can make this. Anybody can make the same argument anyplace else. Well, we'll do this. This will cut down on the prairie and whatnot, which would be a valid argument. I would challenge us if we think that affordable housing is a very important thing. And I would encourage us to define affordable housing and put it somewhere in our comp plan. But that, off the side, I cannot support this because I believe it will, it's not meeting with our comp plan, and it's incompatible land use. Will in time be there, but I don't think it is there now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Sure, Lou, go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Good. Okay. The matter having come before the Planning Commission on September 8th, 2020, and there being present a person requesting approval of a zone ZC-4-20, a request for a zone change from R8 to R17 zoning district. The applicant is Northwest Solutions Investment Group, LLC. The location is plus or minus 4.26 acre, a parcel located at 3520 North 15th Street. I would urge the adoption of findings B1 through B7. B8, that this proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies as follows. And I'm going to cite a few. I would cite objective 1.02 water quality. I would cite objective 2.01 business image and diversity. I would cite objective 3.05 neighborhoods. And I would also cite objective 4.01 city services. B9, the public facilities utilities are available and adequate for the proposed use. This is based on the staff report. There is adequate water, sewer, and other utilities available. B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time because it has flat topography, and that was identified in the staff report. B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses, because any increase that would come as a result of the zone change in traffic would be negligible. This was also per the staff report. In conclusion, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds the request of Northwest Solutions Investment Group, LLC, for a zone change as described in the application should be approved.
Thank you. I have a first and a second.
I'll second.
I have a second by Fleming. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
No,
Rumpler.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. ZC-4-20 passes. Next, we have ZC-5-20, proposed zone change from MH8 to an R17. Tammy's going to walk us through this.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. So this evening, we have a zone change, ZC 520, from MH8 to R17, and the property owner is Howard LLC, and the applicant is Connie Kruger with Stonehenge Development and Government. And the request is a zone change from MH8 to R17. The location of the property is on the west side of US 95 and south of West Nider Avenue and east of North Howard Street, located at 2926 North Howard. And the legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on August 22nd, 2020. This is a location map, and this is the subject property outlined here in the yellow. And it is south of Nider Avenue, which is located here along Howard Street, and this is Fruitland Lane. And this is a close-up of the aerial photo of the subject property here outlined in red. And there's an existing 700-square-foot house and a detached accessory structure currently on the site. And the property has been used as a single family for many years. It's relatively flat, and it is constrained by the presence of overhead utility lines that would traverse over the front portion of the property at an angle, as you can see here. And it does abut a multifamily project currently to the rear, and I'll get into more of that during the zoning portion of my presentation. So there are 4 required findings that I'll go through this evening with my presentation. Finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and this does fall into the land use area of Fruitland, and it is located in the transition area. These areas are where the character of the neighborhood is in transition and should be developed with care. The street network and the number of building lots and general land use are expected to change greatly within the planning period. And this is the Fruitland boundary outlined in black, and this is where the subject property is located. And I've provided 4 of the comprehensive plan policies and objectives, so natural environment, economic environment, home environment, and administrative environment. So there are additional comp plan policies and objectives on pages 5, 6, and 7 in your staff report. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. So city staff from engineering, streets, water, fire, parks, and wastewater departments have reviewed the application in regard to their request for the public utilities and facilities. And each department has indicated that there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed zone change as requested. And there was no objection to the zone change request as proposed, but certain requirements will be triggered with new construction on the property, and that would be handled at the time of building permit. The public facilities and utilities are not available, and this is continued from the last screen. The streets, as far as streets, the subject property is bordered by Howard Street to the west, and a sidewalk would be required along Howard Street at the time of any construction. And there are additional comments on pages 7 and 8 of the staff report. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. The site is generally flat, and then there are no topographical or physical constraints that would make the subject property unsuitable for the zone change from MH8 to R17. However, the site is constrained by the presence of overhead utility lines that traverse over the front portion of the property at an angle, and the applicant would need to verify if the lines are high voltage and would be required to follow the guidance per the fire department as noted in the required condition. And with a little follow-up, the fire department did let us know that they are high voltage lines, so they would need to meet the required condition in our staff report, as well as a condition that Avista will propose. And I've included some site photos. So this is looking east along Fruitland Lane toward the subject property. This is from the southeast corner of the property, looking northeast at the neighboring property. This is looking northwest along Fruitland Lane at the neighboring properties across the street. And this is looking south along Fruitland Lane at the abutting property. Finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. So Chris Bosley provided comments saying that the proposed zone change itself would not adversely affect the surrounding area with regard to traffic, as there is no traffic generated from a zone change alone. The applicant states that no specific changes are planned for the property, but rather the change would be for marketability. However, if in the future the property is redeveloped to the maximum allowable density, traffic would almost certainly increase. But with only half an acre available for the development, only a small increase would be expected. The increase would be negligible compared to the over 1,600 cars per day that use Howard Street. The Streets and Engineering Department has no objection to the requested zone change. And this is the zoning map. The subject property is outlined here, and it does abut an R17 zone. And that zone currently is a multifamily housing project to the rear of the site. You can see another R17 zone here with the PUD, R17 here. And then just to the south of subject property, we've got MH8 and R12, and then across to the east is the C17. And proposed R17 zoning district is intended as a medium-high density residential district that permits a mix of housing types. It permits single-family, duplex, and multifamily housing. And this district is for establishment of those areas that are not suitable for lower density residential use due to proximity to more intense types of land uses, and approximate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer between arterial streets and low-density residential districts. And here's the following list of principal uses that are permitted in the R17 zoning district, and there are additional uses located in your staff report. And this is a zone change map that I've included in your staff report, and this is the subject property. And this was MH8 to a R17 zone. This was also MH8 zone, rezoned to R17, and this was also MH8 to R17, and then we've got several other ones in the area. This is a land use map, which shows that this was currently single-family or mobile home, and then you've got multifamily, duplex, residential, and some commercial and single-family. And the decision point is provide a recommendation to the City Council regarding the proposed zone change from MH8 to R17 on approximately 0.50 acres. And the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make the appropriate findings to approve, deny, or denied without prejudice. And I also mentioned that there is one condition required in your staff report. And the gentleman that called when we started the meeting also submitted a comment, and you should have that in your staff report, or in your packet. Any questions for me?
Questions for Tammy?
Thank you.
I guess not. Thanks, Tammy. Hillary, I guess Connie's going to speak again as a representative.
Correct. And then
And-
after that, I don't have anyone else that signed up to speak, but the gentleman that spoke, Chris Cox, asked that we read his comments into the record, so I'm
Sure.
happy to do that
Go
for
right
you.
ahead.
Well, we can do that after Connie's.
Okay. Connie, I'm going to swear you in one more time, if you don't mind. Do you swear to tell the
Yes.
whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go right ahead. Thanks, Connie.
I'm going to do another screen share. Okay. As has been mentioned, the owner of this property is Howard LLC. And Howard LLC is owned by John McAdams, and Mr. McAdams actually lives in Japan, so he cannot be here today. But I'm here to represent him, and I will stand for any questions that you may have. Again, quite a variety of topics, and the staff has covered these quite well, so I'll get on those that are relevant. But as we see, this property is located on North Elm Street. This is an area along north of I-90 and on actually the west side of US 95. And this is near Lowe's, the grocery outlet. There are quite a few different commercial developments in the area. This is about a half acre block. So we're tonight proposing that this be rezoned from MH8, which is a district very oriented toward mobile homes and manufactured housing, to the R17, which will allow for that medium high density residential housing. There are four circumstances that we believe justify the amendment. The first is the surrounding high density zoning. The second is the changing land uses on a major collector and in the surrounding area. Third is the available infrastructure, and fourth is the history of these zones in the area.
Connie, while you're paused, can you do your full expansion of your screen?
Yeah, is it not showing that way?
No, it's showing the slides on the left.
Oh, okay, hang on one
Just be
second.
easier for viewing, please.
I have three screens in front of me, so it's sometimes hard to see, to know. Hang on one second. I'm going to go back to my screen share real quick.
Well, you're sharing it. It's just if you can hit under the slideshow tab, and then we just want to be able to see the full screen.
Did that do it for you?
That did it. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we have the four circumstances that justify the amendment. And so the first is the zoning and land uses of the adjacent and surrounding area. So again, here you can see our property, which is at 2 units per acre would be the density because we have a half acre lot. And you see this within the context of all of the surrounding zoning. So R12 zoning, blue is the MH8, and the orange colors being the R17. And then there's quite a bit of commercial property there, 95. These are some of the projects in the area. There's actually quite a number of high density housing developments within the area. And so here you can see that we have gone through done a similar field assessment to what was done on the prior property. And we're finding ranges that you'll see here on this slide from 10 units, actually a little over, close to 9 units per acre, going up towards 20 dwelling units per acre. So quite a range of housing types and densities within that area. And then we move on. Again, same stretch of road here along Howard, and we see more units that are similar. So a range going from 8 up to about 19 units per acre in that area. So as you drive Howard and as you drive the other roads that are immediately around, you see a lot of this high density development occurred in the area. And some of it is on properties that are zoned commercial too. So here in this slide, you see some of that C17 zone. We are here on a major collector, and so you can see that Howard has that purple designation. So a road system that is designed to absorb higher levels of traffic. And within this area, we also know that there are a lot of services, amenities, grocery stores, restaurants that are within walking distance of the property. So you can see grocery outlet, Lowe's, natural grocers. And then, of course, you're probably all very familiar with that area, the variety of small businesses that are located within the commercially zoned properties. So this is an area where the walkability score would be enhanced by the location of the high-density zoning in proximity to the commercial uses and services that are available. Staff has hit on the history of rezones in the area. So here's our property, and again, you can see the wide variety of different rezones that have occurred, including the property directly to the east and the property to the north were rezoned to R17. As to infrastructure, we have our primary access from North Howard Street, which is a major collector. All of the road infrastructure is in place. I did think we have a note from one of the staff members that we would be required to have the sidewalk with the development. We have arterial access surrounding us on all sides and major interchanges at US 95, North Ramsey Road. So we know that with redevelopment, we would be required to maybe revise our existing approach, create a new approach that would be more suited to multifamily development. But water, sewer, hydrants are all in place and serve the need. And so this point in time is year where we don't have the concerns that have been expressed with the various departments of the city. So the effect of the rezone, the character of the overall area is a high-density residential end use, and our rezone consistent with this. And we feel that this would impact neighboring properties in the same way as the current uses in zoning, which is an increase in noise traffic utility needs. And if it's not granted, the property owner doesn't really want to do a manufactured or mobile home development, and feels that this is really the type of zoning that allows him to develop consistently with what we have happening to US 95 area. We look to the comprehensive plan and we find that it recognizes that Fruitland today and tomorrow is a commercial corridor with adjacent multifamily uses. The density will increase and that it provides for affordable housing. So in summary, our points, we're in a transitioning area with high intensity highway and arterial commercial zoning. This allows for multifamily housing that blends with the surrounding area. We're located on a major collector, allows us to exercise the same property rights as others have, and it's consistent with. I am here to answer any questions for you.
Thank you, Connie. Any questions for Connie? Doesn't look like we have any.
Would you like me to read the comment?
Sure, I'm sorry.
And then you could do the rebuttal for her after that,
Okay.
if you'd like to do that. Okay, so this is from Chris Cox. This is an email that we received on this zone change on August 27th. He said, I do not think this change should take place. Increasing density from 8 homes to 17 homes per acre in this already congested area would not be in the neighborhood's best interest. Also, my home is located directly across the street, and cars coming and going will be very noisy and disruptive. Especially at night, the headlights will shine directly in my windows, disrupting the peace and waking me up. My property will become very undesirable, likely causing the value to plummet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Connie, we have no one else, so Connie, do you want to address what Hillary just read, or no comment?
I would just say that we do recognize, and as you saw in the presentation today, we recognize that with higher density housing, that there are more impacts from light, noise, traffic, etc. And it is a bit unavoidable, but we're trying to site properly within a neighborhood where that type of development is occurring, and feel that is a responsible location to place the multi-family.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this? If not,
Well,
go ahead, Peter.
I believe this one is more progressive land use and planning than the other one. So this makes sense to me that the growth is here and so forth, for whatever it's worth. I support it.
Okay.
Commissioner Luttrop, one of your comments that you talked about with respect to the comp plan, I think we all struggle a little bit with this affordable housing notion, and we don't have a number, we never know what that is. What price point or what guarantees that to be affordable. Certainly, I think in the nature of what is in that greater neighborhood, this will be as affordable as the housing we're going to have in this area. I would imagine it's going to be rental housing, multifamily, and reasonably affordable. For that reason, I think it's a plus. And recognizing all of the previous other zone changes in that area, this is commensurate with all those other ones and consistent with all the other ones, so I support it as well.
I will not argue against affordable housing, it's just that it's all in the eyes of the beholder. And that's the issue.
I'm agreeing with you.
Well, Howard Street, I drive through all the time, and Howard is our affordable housing right now. It's mobile homes, it's the lowest cost square foot box on dirt. And so the lifespan of the units is aging, and it will no longer be viable. So I think this is the right direction for this area. It's walkable. People can get to the workforce that they need to be. They need to be doing those jobs in proximity to their homes. And so it eliminates that transit to and fro, and it keeps the walkability ratio. My only concern is as this starts to fill out, I think that street is at dead ends from Niter into Howard. It's a scary street. It's getting scary all the time because the traffic knows now it can cut through. So I think we're going to have a trigger at some point to put a light there, because nothing else from all the way down from Prairie all the way to Apple Way, there's nothing stopping you. So they do have issues there, and the police are watching it more closely. So I'm in support of this. I think it's the direction that this particular area that is so accessible to so much retail and commercial is a very valid area to get a higher density in. And I would hope that this builder or the developer will attend to adjacencies in, the neighborhood and try to, work with it. But the stock there is aged and pretty tired. We even have horses over there, believe it or not, 4 horse. So, so I'm in support of this.
That's a block over.
A block over. Oh, we all know where it is.
I would have to totally agree with Commissioner Fleming on what she just said, because that area is mobile home kind of, and they're aging, and I think we're going to see more of this come before us. And, I'm working with Mike and Hillary on the infill ordinance changes, and this is one of the areas that, we know are going to change at some time in place as, economics change. Affordability is, I guess it's in the eye of the pocketbook more than anything else. We use it a lot, and it's just a matter of land costs and construction costs and what the project's going to be. So I would support this if I was voting as well. So more discussion. If not, we'll move for a motion. If someone wants to do that.
I just want to say that
Sure.
I'm in agreement with all the other commissioner comments, and I support the zone change.
Thank you, Lou.
Mr. Chair, we need to close the public hearing as well.
Yeah, I'm going to close public hearing. Thank you, Hillary. She's my wing lady. She always gets me in track for all the stuff I forget sometimes. So thank you. So again, asking for a motion.
Are you okay? I was just
We
wondering.
got something
Are we
else,
okay?
Hillary?
I'm waiting for them. Are we okay?
We're good?
Okay. I'll
Okay.
make a motion.
Thank you.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on September 8th, 2020, and there being present a person requesting approval of a ZC-5-20, request for a zone change from MH Mobile Home -8 to R Residential -17 zoning district. The applicant is Howard LLC. The location is plus or minus a half-acre parcel located at 2926 North Howard Street. I'd like to accept the findings B1 through B7. Moving on to B8, this proposal is in conformance with the comp plan policies as follows. I see the importance of the proximity to service businesses, low-wage workers housing nearby their jobs, and surrounded by mobile home parks, that this will be a step up. We're in a transitional area, we're close to collectors, and it's consistent with our comp plan. B9, that public facilities and utilities are available and adequate for the proposal per our city services response to all of that. And B10, pardon me, that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time. The only caveat is the power lines and high voltage may or may not have a constraint as to the limits of the actual buildability. Right now, we're looking at somewhere between 8.5 units. So that is certainly on the shoulders of the developer. B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and or existing land uses. Again, we go back to the traffic, and that's a minimal load from 8 to 8.5 units. And finally, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds the request of Howard LLC for a zone change as described in the application should be approved. Special conditions applied are as follows. Fire per the 2015 edition of the International Fire Code. Structures shall not be constructed within the utility easement beneath the high voltage transmission lines, and outdoor storage within the utility easement beneath the high voltage transmission lines shall be limited to non-combustible material. Thank you.
Thank you. First, need a second.
Second.
Excuse me? Second?
I will second.
I have second. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. ZC-5-20. Up next is, thank you. We have a PUD-2-04M.1. Applicant is Hagedorn Hospitality, and it is a request for proposed zone, we just did that. It's a proposed amendment to a limited design PUD. And Sean, I guess you're gonna give us a little update.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So before we get started, I'd like to thank everybody in attendance tonight, Planning Commission, public participants, present and digital, the applicant's representatives, city staff members, and the production crew back there that nobody ever gets to really see, but keeps this all running for us.
Thank you. It's nice of you to say.
All right, so before I dive in, we take a deep dive into how this fits into city code. I'd like to point out how this banner will work. So up at the top, we have a limited design PUD 204, which was approved in 2004. M.1 stands for a modification of a portion of that original approval. And then here in yellow, where it says banner guide, is like the leading statement for each one of the slides. There's very limited real estate that I'm working with here, so I pushed it up high so you'll follow me along. So the owner applicant is Hagedorn Hospitality Company, and the representative here is John Barlow, doing business as JRB Properties. All right. So this is the location of the request. You can see here, and I have it typed up that you can read. The 2004 approved PUD measured a total of 163.3 acres. There is a request to add 2.4 acres there, and the red arrow is pointing to that for a grand total of 165.7 acres. The legal notice was mailed. It was also, the property was posted, and it was published as required by city code. So the request is Hagedon Hospitality is requesting the modification of a 2004 limited design plan unit development. It'll allow the construction of 3 structures instead of the one that was originally approved, totaling no more than 275 units, and each one of those structures would have a maximum height of 220 feet from average finished grade. The uses proposed include multifamily and hotels. That multifamily would be made up of residential apartments as well as condos. The original approval did approve apartments. So there are some requested modifications. I can read each one of these into the record, but suffice it to say that I went over most of them now. The ones that I haven't mentioned are a reduction in the golf course maintenance area, which we will go over. Mentioned adding the 2.4 acres. There's also a dedication of approximately a third of an acre for public open space along Fernan Creek Pond, and we'll get into that in a little while, as well as creating a 1.3 acre private open space garden. Also, there is a request for a 6-foot privacy fence along the right-of-way, as well as it being gated. That was also approved in the original. We just wanted to reiterate that it would apply to this portion of the request as well. All right, so a little bit of the history of the site. I will just touch on this, and I'll let the applicant speak to this in further detail. So this is the official statement of award from Urban Land Institute, also known as ULI, as written in their magazine in December of 1992. On what was once the site of an abandoned lumber mill has emerged as an inspirational golf course, reflecting the beauty of its lakeside settings, as well as the transition of the local economy from one based on extraction of natural resource to one based on tourism. The project's developer and design team are commended for their attention to the environment and the restoration of a once degraded property. All right, so my next slide speaks to adjacent land use actions that have happened nearby. There's been a few within. I can touch on those as well. Suffice it to say that it was annexed, the majority of it in 2004. There was a special use permit for commercial recreation, and the zone changed from light manufacturing to C17 inside. On the external portion of the property over here, we have a zone change where Sanders Beach is at. That went from R8 to R3. There also was 2 commercial parking requests up here closer to Sherman. That's for commercial parking in an R17 zone. Let's see, there's also a special use permit for a wireless tower, which is right over here in existence. It looks like a pine tree. Let's see here. There was also 2 R34 special use permits. One was approved and one was denied. They came back to back in 1992 and 1993. Also, I'm not sure if I pointed out, but I'll point it out right now, the modification area of the PUD is right here in yellow, and you can see in a following map that what the extents are of the full limited design PUD. This slide speaks to the original approval. There was a maximum of 50 units that were allowed to be within the building envelope, a maximum height of 60 feet. Yes, maximum height of 60 feet, and the setbacks were modified from 20 on the front, 10 on the sides, and 25 on the rear to 0 feet for the side, front, and rear yard setbacks. So this is the original the original exhibit that was provided in 2004, and you can see here in the legend, it might be a little bit hard to read, I tried to get it as big as possible, that most of the area is open space out there. It consists largely of the golf course, maintenance area up here in this orange color. The part that we're talking about right here are the golf course apartment site. There's a future hotel that's planned for the purple area. There's an existence right now down here in the orange area as the terraces, and then future development of open space as well as townhome site over further east. So now I'm going to zoom in to this area right here to discuss the site a little bit closer. So the maintenance area would shift right here. There's nothing really currently there other than a couple of greens. I imagine the applicants can speak to this. It looks like they might do some testing out there. Maybe there's a couple of greens that they test out, and I'm sure that they apply it to the golf course. The C-17 area over here that exists right now, which was the old campsite, would be added to the limited design PUD, as well as the vacation of 23rd and Ashton, which has already been approved by council, has been vacated. Ashton would be rebuilt at the northern end of the PUD request right here. And then private open space will be added to Fernand Mill Pond if it's approved. All right, so current zoning, as you can see, limited design PUD in the center here. The modification area is yellow, C-17 is red, R-17 is the orange color, R-12 is the lighter green color, dark green is R-8. The blue area is navigable water. And over here we have R3 PUD and R1. So some land uses that are nearby to the site. Got to catch up with my paper. So over here we do have Sanders Beach and the Jewett House. We have 2 single families that were annexed near the area in 2000. We have multifamily condo development up here on the hill. That's Cambria. A bunch of single family along the western edge of the request, or the PUD itself. We have a couple of multifamily and duplexes that are mixed in around the corner here, some more single family houses. There is a cemetery, some commercial uses, restaurants. There's a mixed use building right here that has apartments and a coffee and bakery in it. All right, so I designed the staff report a little bit differently than I would normally do one because this request was large, and I wanted to make sure that everybody understood what the voice was and who was speaking through the staff report. And I've designed my PowerPoint to be the same, so you can see that the required findings and code, etc., are in black. The applicant's statements will be in blue text, and staff comments will be in red italicized text. All right, so I wanted to read this into the record for everybody's understanding, as well as people that may be tuning in from home, is that the findings of the Planning Commission make for the limited design planned unit development are different than for a regular PUD, in that most of the findings pertain to the site performance considerations within the building envelope and how it impacts the surrounding area. The Commission should bear in mind that a limited design PUD is intended to provide for flexibility and diversity of use by removing the limitations in the typical lot-by-lot approach to development. It's not intended to be a means to waive certain development regulations. The Commission must therefore ascertain if the concept of the proposal is unique enough that it merits the flexibility afforded by the limited design PUD regulations. The Commission may wish to consider that certain benefits accrue to the city and the public by virtue of a LDPUD, namely the ability to add conditions and the ability to lock in development plans for the future, barring any future modifications, which is what we're here for tonight, and the ability to negotiate solutions that benefit all. Planning Commission must review this request in all of its part to base their decision. And I won't read the rest of that into the record. So the next portion is the limited design planning development standards as they're provided in code. The maximum allowable density for limited design planned unit development shall be based on the overall gross deeded land area and shall be equal or less than the overall density and density bonuses that are permitted by the applicable zoning districts in which they're planned. The density I will follow up in just a moment. So in order to achieve purposes of these provisions, the following standards must be modified, or can be modified. Any provision pertaining to site performance standards, which I have listed here, height, bulk, setbacks, et cetera, and any provision establishing buffering, landscaping, or other similar requirements pertaining to the site design. And then this last little portion here basically states that all of the parking spaces serving residential must be within 200 feet of the building. In this case, they are actually underneath the building. All right, so move on to C17 zoning district, and this can be found on page 8 of your staff report. There are approximately 50, I didn't count them all, but there is a lot of them of what's allowed by right in a C17. Once again, the applicant is asking for hotel motel use in multifamily housing, which covers both the condos as well as the apartments. So the density, they are requesting 275 units within the 3 towers. Overall density for the limited design PUD would be 2.9 dwelling units per acre. So pursuant to section 1707-275, review criteria, a limited design plan unit development may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all of the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. And the first, there's a number of findings to be made, so I'm going to be here for a little while. A through H, I believe. Right. So A is the proposal produces a functional, enduring, and desirable environment. And before I read into the record what the applicant provided, I wanted to point out that this seems to be the overarching kind of finding, that you would look at all of the findings, and if you can make those findings, the overall arching finding A should come into view and make sense. Okay, so the applicant's voice here, this is going to take quite some time and took a lot of slides and was very text heavy, so I thought I would read it. The Ashton proposed project will create a highly desirable residential apartment, condo, and hotel project that was envisioned over a decade ago. The Coeur d'Alene market is demanding more of this product type, and this proposal will fulfill that demand in the highest quality way. Integrated into the existing master plan project, the Coeur d'Alene Resort Golf Course. Before submitting this proposal, Hagedon Hospitality Company has gone through numerous concept design iterations with building architecture, location, spacing, 85 feet apart, and matching the building height to the downtown standard of 220 feet in order to create a sensitive development that minimizes views and vista impacts, preserves trees for buffering, and to create world-class architecture that is representative of our community. Further, as shown in the renderings, the buildings are handsomely designed with stepped vertical feature facade elements at the stairways of each end and at the elevator tower in the middle. The stepped roofs produce several different planes and sloped roofs. Additionally, the site topography will result in the buildings having different finished roof elevations. The buildings are also designed so that they're spaced apart approximately 85 feet to provide nice view corridors that may be viewed through the existing forest of trees. The building's architecture will be such that the use of multiple materials and forms will be implemented, understanding that they will be subject to design review before a building permit is issued. So you can tell this is red text. This is where staff comes back in. So the proposal for Site 4 takes into consideration pedestrian and vehicle movements, provides hotel and living accommodation, and provides extensive landscaping and buffering. This request meets those two standards. The site would perform as designed for many decades. The term desirable is a discretionary term. And so in your staff report, I defined what the word desirable means, both as an adjective and as a noun, and then applied it to a desirable environment, which implies that the site and structure design be of high quality. I also reiterate that Design Review Commission will be required following approval if there is approval. And so I guess there's another bite at the apple for design. So the Planning Commission must determine, based on the information provided before them, whether or not the proposal would produce a functional, enduring, and desirable environment. So finding B is that the proposal is consistent with the city comprehensive plan. And this is where we get into the meat of things. This is a long section. So because the modification is a part of the whole limited design PUD, staff included both the historical heart and the Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline land use sections of the 2007 comprehensive plan. Note that Site 4 is 1/3 of a mile from the Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline. So here is the historical heart land use area. You can see the majority of this is stable established. Inside of the request is stable established. There's also transition, so I provided both of those definitions on the slide. They also apply to the slide for the Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline as well. So there's some language that goes along with these. The historical heart of the city of Coeur d'Alene contains a mix of uses with an array of historic residential, commercial, recreational, and mixed uses. A traditional tree-lined, small block, grid-style street system with alleys is the norm in the area. Neighborhood schools and parks exist in this location, and residents have shown support for the long-term viability of these amenities. Focusing on multimodal transportation within this area has made pedestrian travel enjoyable and efficient. Widely governed by traditional zoning, there are pockets of infill overlay zones that allow development based on floor area ratio, and many other entities and ordinances serve this area and ensure that quality development happens for generations to come. Numerous residential homes in the area are vintage, and residents are very active in local policymaking to ensure development is in the scale of the neighborhoods. Historical heart tomorrow. Increased property values near Lake Coeur d'Alene have intensified pressure for infill, redevelopment, and reuse in the areas surrounding the downtown core. Stakeholders must work together to find a balance between commercial, residential, and mixed-use development in the historic heart that allows for increased density in harmony with long-established neighborhoods and uses. Sherman Avenue, Northwest Boulevard, and I-90 are gateways to our community and should reflect a welcoming atmosphere. Neighborhoods in this area, such as Government Way, Foster, Garden, Sanders Beach, and others, are encouraged to form localized groups designed to retain and increase the qualities that make this area distinct. And these are the characteristics of historical heart. So the Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline is another one that seems to apply a little bit more to the entire site because it calls it out directly. The Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline is a mix of uses from east to west. The easternmost shorelines are home to hillsides that are difficult to develop. And speaking of this area out here, the easternmost shorelines are home to hillsides that are difficult to develop. Sorry, read that again. As the shoreline progresses west, the slope becomes less restrictive, giving way to high-end condos, a golf course, beaches, marinas, restaurants, the Tubbs Hill Recreation Area, public parks, a resort, residential homes, and a college campus. Citizens treasure the shorelines and actively seek to protect and provide as much public access to this amenity as possible. The shoreline ordinance was passed to protect, preserve, and enhance visual resources and public access to the lake by establishing certain limitations and restrictions on shoreline property located within city limits. So Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline tomorrow. For many, the Coeur d'Alene Lake shoreline is what sets the city apart from countless other places. The shoreline will continue to experience pressure from the development community due to its effect on property values and for the benefits it provides. As property improves, it's extremely important to balance the needs of both the public and private entities to ensure that this asset is available to all to enjoy while remaining viable for economic development. Increasing public access to our waterfront will not only create a space for enjoyment, it will provide major economic opportunities for businesses that serve our citizens and welcome tourists. Shorelines are a finite and valuable resource. Our city is committed to ensuring that only appropriate growth takes place now and in the future. All right, so now we're into the goals and objectives, and as you saw in the previous the previous two zone changes, that there are 4 total goals. The first one is natural environment. Objective 1.05 is protect the key vistas and view corridors of the hillside and waterfront that make Coeur d'Alene unique. So this is blue, so it's the applicant's voice here. what they're basically saying is that this area was recently acquired, the right-of-way was vacated, which allowed the buildings and to allow a buffer area to be built around this proposed parking lot and to also buffer the future structure. So we'll go into what the renderings look like. They used Google Earth Pro, and they placed the buildings into that, and they placed side-by-side before and after pictures. This single one right now, picture is an illustrative aerial image looking south over the new proposed buildings as well as the golf course. So, objective 1.06, urban forests. They are basically saying that the site plan minimizes tree removal based upon where they place the building, strategically placing the parking underneath of the structures to minimize tree removal. 1.07 urban forests, no tree removal is planned for the city right-of-way unless it's necessary for rerouting the access for Fernand Mill Pond. Objective 1.8, forests and natural habitats. So I added this one. Basically, I'm pointing to objectives 1.06, 07, and 09 that speak to retaining as many significant trees as possible. Objective 1.09, parks. This is in your staff report as well. The applicant is proposing to add 0.31 acres of public park here. You can see that it would access the Fernand Mill Pond. They would provide a public access shelter as well as a fishing dock out here for the public. They also are showing private improvement, which would be parks that are bisected by the entrance to these two structures here that would be available to the users of the site. So objective 1.11, community design. They provided numerous examples of how they designed this project to meet this objective. I won't read them all into the record. All right, so now we're starting to get into the illustrative side of things. So this is the concept layout with building setback from the right-of-way. The three structures are located right here, looking down at a bird's eye view. All right, objective 1.12, community design, support the enhancement of existing urbanized area and discourage sprawl. The applicant is saying that the location of these buildings would provide opportunities for walking, biking, or vehicle and reduce sprawl on the prairie. Objective 1.14, efficiency. Once again, that they would be reconstructing Ashton and a portion of 23rd Street per the memorandum of understanding with the city, which there is a requirement that they would have to do this, regardless if this gets approved at some point in the future. So this is the infrastructure plan. Suffice it to say that water would come down and serve, and wastewater would also serve the property. You can refer to the conditions that are proposed by staff that speak a little more in depth to what the requirements are for utilities. So objective 1.17, hazardous areas. There's a portion of this site that falls into a 100-year floodplain. This is Fernand Pond right here. They are proposing that the building would come within 25 feet of the high water mark, and the FEMA flood-proof standards would be applied to the development so that it meets FEMA requirements. This is also, I provided a bigger map in water courses under Finding D. So goal number 2, economic environment. So objective 2.4, downtown neighborhood and service nodes. They speak to East Sherman. and the revitalization efforts that we have been doing over the years, and how that this would basically provide 275 rooftops in a small, much smaller area, and revitalize the area. Objective 2.05, pedestrian and bicycle environment. It's very close to downtown, and there's the Centennial Trail, golf course, lakes access, and all of that is near the urban core. So goal number 3, home environment. 3.01, managed growth. Coeur d'Alene's growing. People are seeking rental products that are in demand right now, and that developers are building those as we speak, and they are requesting to do the same, but in a limited design PUD that has some controls. Objective 3.05, neighborhoods. See here that there are golf course facility and tall trees, I-90 to the east. It's important to note that I-90 is very close. It's less than a half a mile away from the project. As well as housing. I won't read all of this into the record. The applicant, I'm sure, can speak to this portion if they would like. But there's demand, lots of demand for housing right now. Capital improvements is the city infrastructure can serve the proposal with no anticipated improvements. City department conditions say that there will be a few improvements, so the conditions speak to that. Objective 3.18, transportation. I speak to this later. I won't go through it now, but it is twice in here. Some of these things end up being circular because the comprehensive plan talks about transportation as well as one of the findings. Goal 4, administrative environment. City services. So city services will be provided, tax dollars will be created for the city. Here is staff comments. So there's adequate capacity in the public water system to support domestic irrigation and fire flow for the proposed modification. That was provided by Kyle Marine in the water department. And stormwater by Chris Bosley. Stormwater will be addressed at the time of development on the subject property at permit. City code requires stormwater management plan to be submitted and approved prior to construction. And then wastewater, there's a sewer master plan that calls out what the improvements need to be made in the area. He refers to that and says that the PUD owner will provide those improvements at no cost to the city. All right, so objective 4.05 is public safety, and they'll provide adequate public safety to our citizens and visitors, and they say that the size in the building and design will meet safety code standards. I believe from a comprehensive plan standpoint, this is talking about police services and fire services which are available in the area. Objective 4.06, public participation. Here we are. All right, special areas. Let's talk a little bit about this one. Urban forest. We'll protect and enhance our urban forest, and those are the methods that the city employs to ensure that those are protected. There are related objectives that I went through, 1.05, 1.06, etc. The applicant provides language in multiple areas talking about maintaining and retaining as many significant trees as possible on the site. So the Planning Commission must determine, based on the information before them, whether or not the proposal is or is not consistent with the city comprehensive plan. And I just provided a whole bunch of information regarding that. Finding C, the building envelopes are compatible with or sufficiently buffered from uses on adjacent properties. Design elements that may be considered include building heights, bulk, off-street parking, open space, privacy, and landscaping. So the applicant describes what they are trying to accomplish here with 85-foot tall trees that are close by, 40-foot tall trees along 23rd, and trying to retain as many of those as possible during construction, and spacing the buildings 85 feet apart for view corridors. So this is building heights. Each one of the buildings are proposed at a maximum height of 220 feet, and approximate elevations were given similar to what was approved originally in 2004. You can see that there is some undulation to the site, but it is not that much, and here are the peak elevations of the building that they are anticipating, as well as the building peak summary information that they gave me on a map. Building bulk, this is where we get into the footprint of each one of the buildings that they are proposing. So building number 1, the base of the building would be 242 feet wide by 122 feet deep approximately. That is this area here. And then the tower above the parking would be this area here. The building core, the interior heated space, conditioned space, would be 242 feet wide by 70 feet deep, with architectural details and decks measuring a total of 90 foot in width. The height above the livable area or the tower would be approximately 180 feet. Building number 2 is exactly the same, although it's turned a little bit to take advantage of the view of the lake, same size, and tower above the parking. And site number 3, or building 3, has been shrunk a little bit due to the nature of a flood area being nearby and providing this open space and not encroaching into that. So it's 212 feet wide by 122 with the same 70-foot core and 90 foot with the architectural detail. Right, site as a whole, here's building 1, 2, and 3. Over here on the right-hand side, this explains a little better, shows it, picture's worth 1,000 words. 122 feet in depth for parking, that is 4 levels below the building. Total height from the base of the building to the peak of 220 feet. 90 foot in width, including features and decks, and 70 feet building core. Now we'll get into the before and after pictures that I mentioned earlier. So this is Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive looking north. Before. This is placed into Google Pro after. Mullen and 19th Street looking east, before and after. Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive looking south, before and after. Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive looking southwest, recently constructed building right here. So that would be this bulk right here, which was placed in by the applicant before and after. Young Avenue at 19th, before and after. Potlatch Hill from the parking lot, where the public park is, and kind of dives off pretty steep down to Fernand Lake there, before and after. Westbound near Potlatch Hill Road, before and after. That's eastbound near Sherman Avenue, the overpass, before and after. Mullen Avenue, westbound, before and after. This is the maintenance area, if anybody was wondering. And from Fernand Hill Road, before and after. So off-street parking, the applicant has not requested a change to off-street parking. I provided the requirement for parking here for both residential uses as well as service uses for hotel motel. Privacy, let's talk just for a moment about this, and thank you for your patience, I'm getting through it. Okay, as described in the decision points at the beginning of the report, the applicant has requested the allowance of a 6-foot privacy fence and access gates along the street right-of-way for privacy, noise abatement, and errant golf balls and typical golf course operations. Gates must be set back far enough to allow for stacking without inhibiting traffic movements in a street. This is consistent with the existing LDPUD, and the applicant provided this graphic showing what the entrance to the building would look like. So Planning Commission must determine, based on the information before them, whether or not the building envelopes are compatible with or sufficiently buffered from uses on adjacent properties. The design elements are listed there. Finding D, the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. Natural features to be considered include topography, native vegetation, wild habitats, and watercourses. So I'm not going to read all of this into the record. But here is the topography of the site. So much like before we saw it in white, I placed it in green so that you'd be able to stick out some much bigger area. These are 5-foot contours. This is the modification area. And as you saw before, inside of this is the red area. That is actually where the building envelope would be. So take all of that into consideration, and then inside of this building envelope is the requested 3 building footprints. You can see it's starting to build on itself as for understanding. Then I use the GIS elevation to determine what the slope is. It's approximately 1.6%. Really the main gain that inside of the building envelope is from the lower point here near the edge of Fernand Mill Pond to a knoll that's right about here where the old campground is, and that is about a 15-foot gain, so it's not too much. And then water courses, I mentioned that before. It was found in finding B. It's in flood zone A. You can see here this is the modification area, and the request would, if approved, they would modify that to meet the flood zone requirements. And this is the rendering of Fernand Mill Pond water course that the applicant provided with the buildings in the background. So the Planning Commission must determine, based on the information before them, whether or not the proposal is compatible with natural features of the site and adjoining properties. Finding E, that the proposal provides adequate private common open space area as determined by the Planning Commission, no less than 10% of gross land area, free of buildings, streets, driveways, or parking areas. Common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. The site, I did some math and I came up with 82.4% is what the open space is. We've discussed this a little earlier, and this provides a little more in detail private open space here and here, as well as the public open space provided over here. 1.38 acres, approximately 1/3 acre there. So Planning Commission must determine whether or not there is sufficient open space of 10% or more. Finding F, the location, design, and size of the proposed building envelope is such that traffic generated by the development can be accommodated safely on minor arterials and collector streets without requiring unnecessary utilization of other residential streets. So there is Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, Ashton, and 23rd that are nearby that actually front this property. Realignment of Centennial Trail to these streets would be provided, and the project is 0.4 miles to the I-90 interchange. This was also provided in goal number 3, objective 3.18. As for comments from city staff, Chris Bosley here basically says that we cannot determine exactly, based upon their request, what the mix of these things will be. Suffice it to say that that mix would be no less than 82 AM peak hours if it was all high-rise apartments, up to 96. If it was all hotel, it would be 145 AM peak hour trips and 165 PM peak hour trips. So, and by what he's saying, by worst case scenario, if it was 100% hotel, that it would not affect negatively the traffic in the area. So Planning Commission must determine based, oh, I might have gotten the wrong one there. So Planning Commission must determine that the design and size of the proposed building envelope is such that the traffic generated from the development can be accommodated safely on minor arterials and collector streets without unnecessarily utilization of other residential streets. Sorry about that, my slides are running together at midnight. So finding G, we're almost there. The proposed setbacks provide, 1, sufficient emergency vehicle access, 2, that neighborhood character will be protected by adequate buffering, and number 3, that maintenance of any wall exterior from the development's property. So here is the emergency vehicle access. You can see that there would be 4 points that would be provided, and the fire department would review these at the time of permit to make sure that they meet the minimum requirement. Neighborhood character will be protected by adequate buffering. The applicant provided numerous maps as well as illustrations showing that it would be substantially buffered. You can see finding C for the before and after photos. So the maintenance of any wall exterior from the development property, the applicant has said that they would provide perpetual maintenance into the future for perimeter fencing as well as the buildings. So, Planning Commission must determine, based on the information before them, whether or not the proposal setbacks provide for those 3 items that we just discussed. Finding H, the proposed building envelopes will provide for adequate sunlight, fresh air, and usable open space. So we discussed open space at length. Here in blue is the applicant's response to this requirement. Suffice it to say, I zoomed in here to the north side of things. They are 257 feet away from the right-of-way at Mullen. 23rd Street here, 47 feet away, sliding over a bit, 10 feet away at this edge right here, 308 feet from Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, 184 feet away, 151 feet away, and 168 feet away, and 85 feet between the towers, 25 feet away from Fernand Park. So the Planning Commission must determine, based upon the information before them, whether or not the proposed building envelopes will provide for adequate sunlight, fresh air, and usable open space. So there is a number of recommended conditions. Most of them I've already touched on. I'd prefer not to read them all into the record unless somebody has a specific question on one. That can conclude my staff report, and I stand for questions. I'd also like to point out before I close that we did receive some public information or public comments on this. We received 2 phone calls. One from a gentleman who owns property at the corner. He said that he was for the request as long as Ashton is replaced and that it accesses back out to Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive. And a gentleman, I didn't catch his name, on Fernand Hill said that he was against the project due to the potential loss of lake views. We received 1 email from Kevin Davis, who was against, and 3 letters that were in favor for. All of those have been provided in your report. Thank you.
Sean, I got a quick question. We had just 2 letters in the package. Are those the ones that you were referring to, or are these in addition to the ones that?
There should have been 3.
I have
2.
1,
Is it double-sided? Check the other.
2, 3 letters. Yeah, 3 letters.
Okay.
So
Yep.
those are the ones you were
Those
referring
are
to?
the 3 letters?
Yeah, I've got
3 letters, an email, and 2 phone calls.
Okay, we're all good then on that. Very good report, thank you. I see you probably put a lot of work into this.
It
Thank
took
you.
some time.
Thank you, very good, very informative. Hopefully, the commissioners got a good picture of what the applicant is going to talk about. So if we have any questions for Sean? John, yeah, go right ahead.
Thanks. And I second the great report.
Thank you.
A pretty extensive one. And as I read your report, what jumps out to me in this unique limited design PUD, we don't see many of those, but you point out that there's 3 benefits to the public. The first one being that ability to add conditions, and there's 16 of those. And a second one is benefit is the ability to negotiate solutions. And the third one is that it locks in at this stage, at the PUD, limited design PUD, kind of locks in significant features. So the question in that locking in the development plans, things that I really like, in my eye here, the architecture of the buildings, I mean, not to the detail, we're not designing it yet, it has to go to design review and all of that, but the fact that it would have stepped roofs and articulated facades, that would be, subject of refinement, of course, in the design process, but, later on, we don't change our mind and say, no, we're going to just put up a shoebox looking thing, I mean, process-wise, a benefit again, one of the benefits of this kind of a process, is what we see there is what we get, correct?
It is, and so Planning Commission must understand that they define that box. And so the applicant has requested this box. And so I guess my input would be if it is something that Planning Commission wanted to see or required that roof top was stepped, that you would define the box as such. That's my only comment.
I mean, we would, that's subject to staff, always has some administrative, interpretive kind of a latitude down the line, but, if what we see down the road sort of mirrors what we see here, that looks pretty good. Similarly, we talked a lot around these tables about open space, and this one kills it in terms of 80% open space or whatever. But, a PUD doesn't really require it to be public open space. It's really, the requirement is open space for the people that live in that PUD, correct?
Correct.
In this case, I like the fact that I'm seeing this little public pond, park, dock thing. I used to go underneath I-90 through the drainage pipe growing up in Fernan. I've spent time in the old mill pond down there, but that's a lock as well, correct? I mean, that we approve this tonight?
If it's approved, it would be a requirement.
That park, and thank you.
I have a question on that part.
Sure.
So I was trying to see where the fence line was and so on. Who actually ends up, because that right now is a pond that is Fernan Pond. Who maintains that over the span of, and the dock? Does that get dedicated to the city, or how does that perpetuity maintenance issue?
The way that the request was written is that it would remain in private hands,
Okay.
maintained by Hagedon, but open to the public.
Open to the public, much like his frontage. Okay, all right, cool.
I just hope with your presentation, Sean, that Mr. Barlow has ample things to talk about.
Hopefully I didn't steal anyone's thunder.
Bring dinner.
Okay,
Are there any more questions?
no other questions?
Mr. Chair, can I clarify something too?
Oh,
So Randy,
sorry.
in reviewing the findings packet, notice that there's an additional finding at the very end, I, which relates to floodplains and landslides. And it was addressed in the original staff report, which is here. And Chris Bosley's on Zoom, so he can speak to that. Sean did already address floodplain, and then if the applicant could speak to that, just so you can make that final finding. It should be straightforward because it only applies to the one building in part. So the third building. I just wanted to bring that up now so you're prepared during the findings. So, thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. John, you gonna come on up, or is it Phil? Or we're
It's
gonna
me.
have both you guys?
No, I'm just the technical person right now.
He's got a, if I start pushing the wrong button, we'd be in trouble.
And Phil, do this stop share first. That'll probably be easier, and then reshare.
Slideshow.
Right there.
Okay, Sean,
All right.
before you get started, do you
Yes, sir.
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
It's nice to see you once again.
Thank you.
It's been a long time since the last
Yes.
time we saw you.
Thank you,
PUD.
commissioners and chairman. As I sat there, I thought that I do also want to acknowledge and appreciate your service to our city, because I don't think people realize how much time you put in. I'm John Barlow. I have been associated with Hagedorn Corporation for going on 42 years. I still work as a independent contractor. I'm still happy that I'm able to do our design and development work, including the resort and the golf course, if I get this right. Our agenda tonight, I'll do an introduction. I'll try not to get redundant on the things that have covered so well by Sean. Phil's going to cover the compliance issues with the limited design PUD criteria, and I want to do a short conclusion after that. But I think it's important that, as Sean did, to talk a little bit about the history of the site. Many people who might be watching, or some of the commissioners, weren't here in the 70s and 80s when our community was primarily a natural resource-based community of mining and lumber and agriculture. And in 1987, we had the opportunity to purchase the site from Potlatch Corporation, and Mr. Hagedorn's vision helped to evaluate how that all could be best used. The site had a lot of environmental problems, and as you can see and recall, wood waste was a huge factor. Leachate was getting into the lake coming from the wood waste. We designed and installed a liner system that's almost 4 acres in size. It covers most of what you see there on the lower side. The liner system collects all the nutrients from fertilizer and all and pipes it back inland. And it also, because of that wood waste, there were methane gas emissions that it collects and has dealt with for the past almost 30 years. Same type of thing was done with the floating green to protect the lake. And as Sean showed you, we received the Urban Land Award in 1992 of excellence for the environmental change and the acknowledgement of how a community like ours transcends from the natural resource bases we had to today. Of course, tourism and everything related to it is a huge part of it. And Sean read the wording of the award. I won't want to go through that without wasting any more time. But then, of course, the result of that is the golf course we know and love today, and many of you, I hope, have enjoyed. At the same time, at that point of the development, we had a number of parcels of land around it that were part of the overall big picture. If you will, we have a big dreamer in our company, and when he dreams of things like floating greens, sometimes they have to happen. But they included visions that he has of how it could be done, and you've seen part of that happen with the terraces, for example. But those came from the 2004 limited design PUD that we received from the city and have in place now for 5 different sites around the development. And the parcel 4 is the piece that we've looked at, and at that time it's such a small piece, and with the Fernand Pond there, the only thing that could be developed was the small apartment project that is in the permit today. Then, when 2016, the campground site became available, we were egged on heavily by your city staff and attorney to please buy this property. There was a lot of environmental problem there. It had sewers that weren't connected to the city, and we did purchase that. We were very careful about how it was renewed so that it could be developable in the future. We employed Welch Comer Engineering and a geotech engineer so that it got put back so it's in a usable state. But it was a massive cleanup. And as a result of that, you see the site that we have today, and it provided with the vacation of Ashton and 23rd quite a bit of setback area and land that's able to be developed that wasn't back in 2004. And the trees, we've flown them several times for part of our analysis. They're between 85 and just shy of 100 feet of height, which also for the view of anybody driving by or on the trail basically hides most of these buildings from a person's view on the ground. And you can see here the views of the setback and the property that's available. So with that, we now find that and with the vacation of Ashton and 23rd, and with the outlines you see of the three buildings, there's a whole different scenario to evaluate for that vision of living on this golf site than what we had originally. So that's why we're here today, to make the formal requests that are in the outline that Sean had of expanding Area 4 to include the newly acquired land and the vacated right-of-way, expand Area 4 for the open space, which now, the way we've designed it, would have 1.3 acres of private and public open space. And then we worked on the height of the buildings. And one of the things that we've done that that makes them so tall is that we took all the parking, which is 4 floors, and put it under the building. And that's what helps us get the 1.38 acres, as opposed to on-site level parking, which is dramatically less cost. But it made the site special, albeit it takes more height to make it work. And the number of the height of the building, number of floors, and is of course how you generate how many units you can build. And it's an expensive cost building, as builders would know. So that's why we need the density we're talking about to make it work. And then finally, as mentioned, the 6-foot tall front yard fence is required. So with just a quick here, these are all the fencing goes along the outside of the parking on both sides of the gate. And so the rest of that is basically landscaping. This has got probably a few more flower beds than we would have, but Mr. Hagedorn talked about making it's the same kind of feel as you go by the resort, of highly manicured, lots of probably geraniums, evergreens and so on, but a park-like feel. And again, if you go along the Centennial Trail, which this is the new Ashton, with the trees and all, it's going to be quite a nice feel. At the same time, the pond actually is Fernand Creek, and the banks and beds of all waterways are owned by the state of Idaho. So it's not that we own it, but it will take maintenance. But all of the area around it, the 0.31 acres that Sean mentioned, we will maintain, just as we do now. As you probably know, all of this area today is all grass that we maintain and have for a number of years, as well as all the way up to the terraces to the south. And then we'll put in a new spur off of the Centennial Trail to pull in. And there's a public bike rack area and the new access dock we envision kids fishing. I have 2 grandkids that'll be there. And then the fencing that I already talked about. So that property would become public property that we would maintain. Again, this is a condition of the PUD that he talked about that's unique to a limited design PUD. You can place conditions, and we acknowledge that. And, we get more flexibility because we got to finally do the design of the buildings, and they might inch around a little, but if we say they're stepped roofs, they're stepped roofs. If we say they're peaked roofs, they're peaked. If we say it's 85 feet, they're 85 feet. But when you get into design, maybe they move 5 foot this way or 2 foot that way. But we still have to be within the parameters. This rendering you saw, and again, it shows the pond and the dock. It's important, you can see the golf course plays right along the side of it there, and the 4 stories of parking is good because then the living units are up away from where I would hit the golf ball, were I to ever slice a golf ball. So that gives you a good feel for that as well. So upon approval, as pointed out, we still have 136.6 acres of open space on the overall project, even with the new development. And it represents a density of 2.9 dwelling units per acre, which is well below projects that you would find being developed on land to the north. We've agreed to the condition that the buildings will have multiple stepped and pitched roofs. We agree that to the open space between them of 85 feet, and the architectural features would be similar, but you know how it is with design, when you get it all finalized, it's going to change slightly, so that's why a limited design PUD is used. These slides show, and we did calibrate them to the height of the actual trees. I don't think they're quite that many, but quite a few, but it's hard to get computers to do it exactly the way you want it. The other thing I would say is that the building site is a unique site that allows such separations, because here's an arterial, Lake Coeur d'Alene Drive, which, you know, if it was somebody's backyard, it'd be different. This is a slope and then I-90, and then everything goes up and above from there. We know that there are some places in town that will see the buildings. Hopefully, that's part of why we like to make nice architecture. It will not be a box. It wouldn't work for how we do things anyway. And I think the slide also helps demonstrate that even though you see them in a view from far away, you also see a lot of Lake Coeur d'Alene from pretty well everywhere in town. So in the essence of time, I'm going to pass on to Phil to go through the criteria, and then I'll be back shortly thereafter to cover the summary.
Thank you, John.
You can ask me questions then if you'd like.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Phil Boyd.
Thank you. Go ahead,
330
Phil.
East Lakeside, Suite 101, Coeur d'Alene. I guess I'll third the preparation of Sean's staff report. It was really excellent. I'll work hard not to duplicate what he's already said. And Chairman Messina, if it's appropriate for you, I'm glad to stop and answer questions if the commission has them as I go, if you want to allow that.
Sure, whatever they like.
Okay, because it might be, while you guys are thinking about it, feel free to stop me and I'll do my best to respond to them. You guys are familiar with that. That's the excerpt from the limited design PUD code, and Sean has covered each one of those. I'm going to go through and provide supplemental information. John and I have been working on this for probably 9 months. One of the things that is enjoyable to work with my only private client that does work like this is because they allow an iterative process and they engage in an iterative process. We start here, we do a little bit of a design work, we see that it's not quite fitting, and we refine and refine and refine. And so over the past 9 months, we've been doing that, which has led us to this proposal here. The first one I'm going to start talking about is, as Sean mentioned, kind of the primary one, functional, enduring, and desirable. What is that? Functional environment to us is functional use of access, land use, and infrastructure. Enduring, what makes a place cool? Why do people want to occupy that space? Well, like the real estate people tell you, location, location, location. The architecture, obviously, of a nice looking facility, and what I'm calling community integration. How does it fit within the surrounding community? Desirable environment is what's the quality of it, amenities and activities. So I'm going to touch on each one of those. Functional environment, and Sean alluded to this as well, we're close to I-90, we've got the Centennial Trail passing right through. So it's the access to this site is very special and easy to get to, whether you're in a car, on a bike, or if you're walking. The land use, this is a really interesting one, and I know the commission, because I've been part of some of these discussions that we've had here about the trade-offs in density. And this site, 275 units, are 2.9 at build-out. That's when if all the other sites that are in their current PUD were to be built. And it's on 165 acres. If you attempt the same thing in a kind of a standard 4-story walk-up, and you guys are familiar with this site over on Grand Mill Drive, there's 275 multifamily units on 18 acres. So we went from, this footprint here is roughly 4.5, 5 acres in here. Now we went to 18 acres to accomplish the same density. You go out into the prairie, and now you're at 78 acres. And interestingly, in this, I couldn't help myself, so I did the math. There's 2.5 miles of roadway in that, which means there's 2.5 miles of water line, 2.5 miles of sewer line, 275 water services, 275 sewer services. So if you were to pick which is a more efficient way to do a functional land use, this seems like a pretty logical way to do it in our assessment. Also about infrastructure, and Sean made a good point. In the report I wrote that no infrastructure improvements are necessary, and I thought about that later, that there's no additional infrastructure. We do have to remove and replace a bunch of infrastructure to upsize it, but it is in the current, whether it's in Ashton now and it's moving over to New Ashton, it won't be additional lineal footage, so there won't be any increase in infrastructure. And again, from our perspective, that's a pretty functional approach to the development. Talking about the enduring environment, location, architecture, community integration, when you look at the location, I just went in and did a ring of distances, so 1/2 mile, 1 mile, all the way out to 2.5 miles, and what falls within that? Well, 1/2 mile out, you're at East Sherman. This project has the potential to be an economic engine for East Sherman, because now there's rooftops down there, so you can imagine more things potentially springing up, and certainly restaurants and other service industries down there being more broadly supported. You get 1 mile out, you're at downtown. You get 1.5 miles out, you're at City Park, you're at NIC, Midtown, Kootenai Health, a pretty straight shot over here to Kootenai Health. So as far as location goes, that's a pretty enduring quality. When you look also at the location of it, that's what you're looking at about the 6th floor, a residential floor on one of these buildings. We just literally took the drone out and programmed it to fly up in 10-foot increments so we could see what the views might look like. Which, again, going back to my earlier point, this is part of the design process that makes it so interesting and fun to work with John, because we started talking about this, John says, well, gosh, I'd sure like to see what it looks like out there. Well, we'll go fly the drone up and down, and we flew it in multiple locations to work on the building orientation, which I'll talk about in a little bit as well. And the architecture, John mentioned that when we first started out on the project and went and met with Hillary, and this was one of the important topics that she said would be architecture would be an important feature that needed to be pretty Class A. And so John engaged a really well-known international architect to work on this, and that was just his initial concept, and I was amazed at how fast he came up with it. Maybe there was more iterations I didn't know about. But that's also an enduring quality. And then integration with the community. These are excerpts from the East Sherman revitalization plan. This plan hasn't been adopted by the city yet, but it contains East Sherman input from the citizens in East Sherman. And when Hillary was working on this with the consulting team and out collecting information, that gateway area, D, that you see here in pink, this was the comment that came out of that. It's the opportunity for a grand sense of a revival and significant redevelopment opportunities. And so I think this is clearly a redevelopment that would occur here, and that kind of investment made in that location may stimulate other investments in that area. And then the desirable environment, quality, amenities, and activities. Obviously, the golf course, the tennis courts, the pickleball courts, the boating, the beach, the restaurant, the event center, all those things that go along with something like this development would be pretty desirable. So I think as far as that criteria goes, we have demonstrated that this proposal meets that standard. The next one is consistent with the city comprehensive plan. And that one is a mouthful. And you can see, all these ones that we went through. And literally, when we started on this, I just went through the comp plan and said, well, gosh, we meet that one, we meet that one, we meet that one. And I'll give you guys a little examples of that. Sean talked about this, the vistas, and it's important to note when you read that objective, it says vista and view corridors to hillsides and the water shorelines. So it's pretty darn specific. Nonetheless, when we built these models, we plugged them into Google Earth just to see what it would look like. And these are little blown up versions of what Sean showed you before and after. So there's before and there's after. And the tree buffering, and granted, Google Earth, the terrain mode, messes with the trees that you see here, but it gives you kind of the scale of what things would look like. And this is over on Mullen. And here you can't even see these. These trees were planted as a condition of the golf course. And so they've obscured the view of the tower back there. And this is Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive heading out of town. And you can see part of it right there. One of the buildings, I think that's building 2. And this is across the street. I did this one kind of because I thought it might be a more worst case scenario. This apartment building blocks it a little bit. This is as you're going on I-90, headed out of town. There you obviously see more of them because you're raised up a little bit. Here's again over on Mullen to try to get a capture. You can see the tree height right here, and you can see the impacts of those, how those trees impact the screening, the buildings. And again, these are just kind of terrestrial views. They're not these views out to the hillsides and whatnot, which is what the standard envisions, is vistas and views to the hillsides or towards the lake. This was the one that we actually put a lot of effort in. John drove up here one day, and because he was thinking about this because he used to live up here, and he commented that we really need to put some effort in that to demonstrate what the potential impact would be up for Fernand Hill. Because again, it was, let's really be forthcoming here and demonstrate what the impact might be, because we think the trade-off between the vista impact is pretty minor compared to the benefit. And you see the building set in there. So you still see that those, in that 85-foot gap in there, you've got that view through there. You can still see the lake into here and the lake over here. And this is a little more complicated computer modeling that takes more time to do that. But it was important. John really wanted to make sure we showed this accurately. So from this standard, the objective of protecting the key vistas and view corridors of the hillside and the waterfronts, we think that this proposed project satisfies that criteria. Urban forests, Sean talked a lot about that. The reason I put this particular slide in there is just to focus on one little element. These parking configurations, this guest parking, have gone around numerous iterations in order to move around the trees. And actually the idea to put all the parking inside came out of the design process when we were doing initial layouts. And I would talk to John and say, we're cutting down a lot of trees and it's negatively impacting our buffering ability. We need to think about something. And he called one weekend actually and said, why aren't we putting everything inside and doing sloped ramped parking, similar to what the resort parking garage is? And we did some math on it, and we could fit it all inside. And when we say fit it all inside, that's with 2 parking spaces per unit, regardless if it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And the reason for that is that's what the market demands. The standards demand something different. But if you want to rent an apartment here, and you're probably going to have 2 cars. And so we're parking all those units in here at 2 units, two cars per unit. Providing ample supply of urbanized open space, and again, this has been hit before, but this was another idea that came out of, gee, what is something that we can, offer up as an amenity to the public? And I think this came out of a discussion I had with Hillary, and I started thinking about this and called John one day and said, gosh, what if we did something like this? And of course, he liked the idea, and the perpetual maintenance is a big deal. The city doesn't have the cost of it, and the Hagedorn Corporation gets it to maintain to the level that they like. So we believe that objective is satisfied. Community design, and this is a mouthful. This objective is a mouthful. But we, again, paid close attention to this and went through the process of making sure we are addressing many of the elements in here. So locating the buildings as far from the public right-of-way as possible to do the buffer in here, heavily landscaping it to this garden-like standard. And these buffering trees that exist now here, we're retaining. So a lot of effort went into making sure that we're achieving that. Varying the building orientations. We also went through a number of iterations. How many buildings do we do? Do we do one big building, two buildings, three buildings? As we continued through that process, this just ended up with less of a wall-like feel, while still achieving the density that's necessary to make it a financially viable project. I mentioned placing all the tenant parking inside, which is an important feature and allowed us to preserve the trees. Guest parking is being screened with vegetation. We have a 25-foot setback in this area. And John mentioned each of the elements. Commissioner Ingalls also talked about these things, and them becoming a condition of a potential approval. And so all of those things wove into community design, which we think that we've really hit that objective on the mark. And Sean mentioned this one about stepping it, and he's right. There's not a ton of roof elevation difference there, but the reason that there isn't is there's only so much excavation we can do without getting into the root balls of the trees.
I got a quick question, since you have this slide up. Where the garden and walking trails are up on that, is that public or is that just residents?
That's residents. That's intended.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a private. This is the public area over in here. The 6-foot fence, just so we're clear, the 6-foot fence isn't intended to be out here. Mm-hmm. The 6-foot fence is back in this area, and it's really golf course control. I anticipate there'll be some sort of fencing out here that kind of separates them from the public realm, but it's not going to be a 6-foot fence out there. But the golf course part of it is deer control, yeah, and the entry, yeah, the entry.
Thank you.
So the next one, and this was talked about earlier here, actually in an earlier part of your meeting, is discouraging sprawl, objective 1.12. Support the enhancement of existing urbanized area and discourage sprawl. I just put this slide back up to show you what the alternatives might be. And this is a pretty sophisticated approach to creating density in the urban core. And efficiency, promote the efficient use of existing infrastructure. And again, no additional infrastructure is necessary, but this infrastructure will be replaced or upgraded as necessary in order to support the building placement and the needs of those. The hazardous areas susceptible to hazardous conditions. I took the FEMA map, and Sean showed that in his presentation. It's rotated, so just everyone to get their bearings here. This is Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, and north is to the left. I know that's not correct, but that's what I could do here. I put the floodplain onto this plan view so you can see where the 100-year flood would go up to. And then I put the cross-section in here to show you that 100-year flood would be in the parking garage elevations. And so the parking garage can be more easily flood-proofed than residential buildings can, because you have more control over going in and putting bulkheads in there to flood-proof the building, plus you just don't have that much stuff inside of them. Also, your electrical and things like that can be more easily dealt with in those areas than if you have outlets every 6 feet in your apartment. Service nodes, prioritize strong downtown compatible service nodes. Again, I put this up here because it demonstrates what the East Sherman vision, and I'll again repeat, yet to be approved by the city council, but certainly input from the citizenry down there, shows this as a gateway area and ready for redevelopment opportunities. And this could be a pretty good economic engine for that part of town. Pedestrian and bicycle environment, this slide works well because I think all of us could probably walk a mile, maybe run a mile, and certainly ride our bikes 2.5 miles, and you can see how far you can get in that. So it's really a pretty darn desirable location for walking and biking. We think we meet that objective pretty darn well. Manage growth to provide a diversity of suitable housing types in existing neighborhoods to match a changing population, and then design new housing areas to meet the city's need for quality neighborhoods of all income and family status. Again, that was some dialogue you folks were having earlier in the meeting about the variety of housing types that are necessary. I put this up here because this came out of the 2030 growth development snapshot, and I put this Coeur d'Alene population by age because you can anticipate that the folks that might be in a facility like this are a little later in life. They're not young folks that are just starting out, but there's a good number of them that are in Coeur d'Alene. So again, we think this proposal meets this housing objective. Back in 2018, Hillary had some prophetic words when she was quoted in the Inlander, because it talked about how, the vision, Coeur d'Alene was growing, and just because of the land availability, it would likely be going vertical, that there would be taller buildings in town. And so those was a prophetic observation at the time, because I think certainly with One Lakeside, we've seen that, and with this proposal, we're also seeing it. Protect and preserve existing neighborhoods. Again, this is an appropriate slide because it defines what the neighbors think is appropriate in that area, and we think that this proposal meets that desire. We talked about the infrastructure here, capital improvements, ensure infrastructure and essential services are available for properties in the development. We don't really have to add anything, we just have to upsize and replace. Transportation, Chris Bosley's comments hit this really well. The Centennial Trail, I think we all know about. This is the realignment, which came out of, was a stipulation in the vacation of 23rd and Ashton as part of that memorandum of understanding Hagedorn Corporation has with the city. City services make decisions based on the needs and desires of the citizenry. This was also out of the 2030 implementation plan, which I found was pretty darn interesting. This is out of the East Sherman survey. So there was a stakeholder survey, and it says, what are the biggest challenges on East Sherman? And it's this financial limitation and risks in overcoming negative reputation. So that's kind of the community feeling of East Sherman. And so when you envision a project like this going in on East Sherman, that demonstrates the substantial investment and dedication to East Sherman, because you're going to put a lot of homes down there. And so, this decision is based on the needs of the desire of the citizens. The citizens are saying, gosh, help us overcome this negative reputation for East Sherman, and this project would certainly accomplish that. Objective 4.02, city services, provide quality services and public safety. John and I talked a lot about this, about these folks aren't going to probably have a large demand on the school system. They're probably not going to have a large demand on the police force or the fire. But one of the things that they will do is their taxable value will generate a pretty good income stream for the city of Coeur d'Alene to support those services. And so these city services will be supported by a pretty considerable tax revenue stream that comes off of this project. So we believe that's satisfying those objectives. So as far as the comprehensive plan goes, we believe that the project, and have demonstrated here, satisfies each and every one of those that we've listed here. I want to talk about the next one, which is the building envelope is compatible or sufficiently buffered from uses. And we've talked a lot about this, so I don't want to repeat some of the things that we're talking, that have been previously mentioned here. Sean talked about the bulk and the mass of the building, and that was another thing that went through numerous iterations. This is a single-loaded corridor building, So from a construction standpoint, that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do a building, because you're building all this infrastructure to put apartments on one side. If you put them on both sides, yes, one side doesn't have views, but you can get that second row. When you start to lay out a building like that, it gets pretty darn big, and we looked at that iteration. John said, we're not doing that, because it was just, the scale was just too substantial down there. So you can see that this approach makes it a little bit more, it makes it more compatible with the area and allows us to keep those buffers in there. Compatible with the natural features, I just put 1,000-foot radius around us just to see what kind of natural features were there. Obviously, Fernand Mill Pond is there, that won't change. But the rest of this, golf course, there's not a lot of things to be impacted here by this project when it comes to the natural features. And then the open space, that one is pretty well done at 82%. And we've talked about the public open space in this area here that will be available. The location, design, and size of the proposed building envelope is that traffic generated can be accommodated, and again, your city engineer addressed that. The proposed setbacks, sufficient emergency vehicle access, the neighborhood character will be protected by the buffering, and Sean had a similar slide in here. I guess great minds think alike, because I put this one in to demonstrate the setbacks, and he also pointed out that the one part that it gets really close is down here, and that was just the nature of the site, and again, trying to work around the trees and making sure we're minimizing how many come down. Adequate fresh air, sunlight, and usable open space, that's a little bit of a nebulous requirement, but as we thought through it, you certainly got a lot of opportunity that sunlight is going to pass through, people can be out on their decks, we've created privacy for them, and there's lots of usable open space in the garden area here down below. So we think we've gone through and demonstrated satisfactorily that we meet each and every one of those criteria. This one down here, I'm not sure that that applies. Maybe it did, but I kind of crossed it out. But maybe it still is appropriate to apply. But we believe that we've satisfied each of those criteria, and I'm glad to answer any questions before I step back. Okay. Very good.
Go ahead, John.
Mr. Boyd, just a quick question on the conditions. There's 16 proposed conditions. I think Mr. Barlow said that you acknowledged those, and they're all good. They've been negotiated and acknowledged, and you're fully on board with what staff wants, and you've agreed to, and all that.
Correct. Okay. Any other questions?
Just a short closing if
Go.
I could. Thank you. So I think it's important to just highlight the benefits of the project. And the thing that we think about and realize, because growth is on everybody's mind in Coeur d'Alene, but Coeur d'Alene is going to continue to grow unless we put a gate on I-90. I don't know how you stop it. And what we believe is this type of housing responds to the desired demand for low-maintenance living in a central near-town location. And the alternative of having another subdivision is not as good when this is where people want to live and play. As shown on the staff report, there are no infrastructure impacts. The staff quote was that the proposal for Site 4 takes into consideration pedestrian and vehicle movements, provides hotel and living accommodations, and provides extensive landscaping and buffering. This request meets the two standards, functional and enduring. The site would perform as designed for many decades. I thought that was significant. The other thing that's real that we don't always talk about in a planning meeting is the fact that this project carries a large property tax base, which would greatly benefit the city of Coeur d'Alene. And those dollars, and then over time it's certainly millions of dollars, are available for workforce housing, whatever the city thinks to be appropriate. The other thing that's significant is With these being mostly retired or empty nest residents, i.e. Phil and I, the project creates a large property tax base for the school district. But we have little to no impact on the need to build another school because these people don't have kids. So that's a real benefit to the school district. We've talked that there's little to no demand on any city services. It does provide a significant amount of sewer and water use fees because, yes, there's the need of water and sewer, but you pay for that by usage. It can't be overstated the economic benefit for existing and new businesses on East Sherman. This could really jumpstart that whole effort. In fact, the reason I went to Phil 9 or 12 months ago was I was reading that you were getting closer to developing the master plan for East Sherman. And I thought this project, which we've had in our mind for a long time, needs to move forward now so it can fit into and help mold what you want to do there. And then the last thing that I note is that's been commented, but due to the unique characteristics of this site, provided by existing trees, long setbacks from streets, adjacent location to Lake Coeur d'Alene and I-90, there is little to no impact on views by others. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions.
I got one question. Is there a timeline on the project, or is it down the road a ways, or with the with the envision that we see in front of us today?
Well, if we get approval, which is one,
yeah,
then we need to go to work on what is the market mix. That's why we have apartment or condo or hotel, and probably a mix. Right now, we believe hotel, a certain amount of hotel, nowhere near this kind of amount, is needed immediately because of the amount of visits that we enjoyed in the last few years, including this COVID year. And people would like to be on the golf course. A lot of them want to live in a condo type setting where maybe they cook their own meals. So we've got to go to work with the feasibility numbers.
Right.
But it doesn't mean anything unless we know we can build it.
Right.
So
it's a long term not down the road, phase. But yeah.
We have, I don't know how close it is here. This way?
There it is.
So we have, you see we have a separate entry here right off of Ashton so that this can be the first building built.
Okay.
And the reason is it's the most remote, so we certainly don't want it to be the last building built. And these people could occupy while this is still another future phase or two.
Okay.
And these could be accessed and constructed with access off of Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive. So it's so big it can't happen all at once.
Sure.
But that's the way we envision it.
And the public open space, the fishing dock, let's call it, is that something that would be in conjunction with the first phase?
I think we'd need to. The only problem I foresee is the construction might make it a little tough with these improvements for this building, but there's no reason this can't all be done in the first phase.
Right. Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Any questions of John? Go ahead, Lynn. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can do it closed or open, but it's a good conversation to have. I think the biggest pushback on any of this is going to be the height. And I think that people on Fernan Hill, you're going to get a big, loud, oh my God, when they see what goes up, because their lake view will be broken. And so as you develop this, I'd encourage you to look at the podium and see if we can get it down, or I'm not big on a lot of cars either. I don't think that every unit should have 2 cars. I'm hoping that people coming here come with an electric car and that we can plug those suckers in.
Well,
So
we'll put the power in
I
for
think
it.
we're looking forward 20 years and say, half you people, I mean, Vancouver now, 75% of the people are driving electric cars. They're saving $250 a month Canadian not to gas up. And they're all going, oh my God, that's a car payment. So I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to be in that same spot here one of these days. And I think we ought to look at parking as be the place we can save some of that height and maybe do less parking. And I don't know, my parents, as they got older, only he drove. She didn't drive. They only needed one car. My sister used the other spot for whatever. But, I don't think that we should give those bonuses away. I think that we should try to lower the building a little, have a little less parking, make sure a lot of it's plug-in and accessible for plug-in so that we can bring this down. And I know you're going to do mixed elements here, and maybe it's a half a hotel and half apartments above or condos above, Four Seasons style. So I think there's certainly a lot to go on with this, but I think overall, as usual, Hagedon has brought it. You set the bar so high that everyone has to jump, and way high. And I think this is very admirable. I think that everything you've done is visionary, and I think it's a real plus, especially for the end of Sherman, and especially for beneficial to your golf course and to the lake. And I mean, all is good. I just would love to see them down a little so that the outcry isn't what I know it's going to be. I just see it. I just see it coming. And I know you've done a very careful sculpturing of it, but I'm saying, okay, that 5-foot podium and then another 5, it's only 10 feet from one podium to the other. It's not enough to make a difference for me. I'd like to see it come down a little bit.
Okay.
And so maybe the complaints will come down. But other than that, this is an awesome project. I mean, no doubt, just an awesome project.
I appreciate that. My wife and I have a lake place, but we live at Lake Tower, which is a very similar model.
Right.
We have 2 cars and it wouldn't work with one, I'll tell you. But that's just us.
Right.
The other thing I'll say is that if we don't need to build this much building, it's going to be better for the numbers to work for us.
Right.
But I don't know that today. And I know that we'll have some power outlet for
Teslas.
Tesla.
A lot of Teslas.
And I understand. And I mean, I've got associates in Los Angeles that part of our company, and I know what it's like. But today, with where we are,
I know.
this is what we think we need to start with. If I came to you and said I want 180, and then we work through it, and I got to have 220, you won't give me that. But there's no reason for us to build the 220 because we'll have to pay for it unless we need it. So we just need, and then we started out at 195 with planning department, and they said, well, but that was like downtown where that's the top of the top floor. And then in the downtown zoning, you get a bonus if you put pitch roofs in. So I said, well, if we put the pitch roof on at the width that we have, we were at 235. So I said, well, they're not going to give us 235, it's 220 downtown. So we essentially took a floor off when we went from 195 to 220 because of the pitched roof. So that's how we got to that number. We literally took a floor off from what we first showed planning when we first started.
Sure, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
I've done hotels all my life
Yeah.
too, so I know the drill.
Okay.
Marriott.
All right.
We're a survivor, so.
Any other questions? Lou, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner Messina. No, I would just say that as proposed, I'm supportive of the project. John, I think that an extraordinary amount of effort and thought and work has gone into this presentation, and I really appreciate it. It certainly informs and educates us, and I really, it's a fine project. And certainly I also share some of the other comments of the other commissioners. But as it has been proposed, I'm supportive.
Thank you, and I'm sorry it took so long.
No problem. Great presentation on both ends of the city and stuff.
We've had, talking about
Peter,
the length.
Go ahead.
We've had Bell River, I think it was there, the modifications that PUDs come before us 3 or 4 times. Finally we worked through it. This presentation might have taken a little bit longer, but it was all encompassing, and I would encourage us to encourage others when they come down there to take a chapter out of their book, because it covered everything, and it was just very, very good.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have Jim Glenn. Jim, you didn't indicate whether you want to speak or not, but. Yeah. You do? Okay, come on up. I'm just going to have to swear you in, Jim. Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Go ahead, Jim. Thanks for waiting.
You're welcome. I'm Jim Glenn. I live at 2910 Fernand Hill, excuse me, Fernand Hill Road. This is not my normal bailiwick, so I'm a little bit nervous. The picture that was taken on the vacant space up on Fernand Hill Road doesn't give a true view of this project. I mean, it's a nice project. My beef is the height, 220 feet tall, 20-story buildings. The view that you have looking this way from that spot is different than my house several doors down, which is different as you head west on Fernand Hill Road. What you see in the depiction is sort of this angle, but as you move down here, it becomes more this angle. And so this is not a workforce housing project. This is a development, okay? And the views that are going to be in this development are going to be what's going to bring in the money, okay? When I bought my house 13 years ago, I bought it for the view. It had virtually, other than trees, an unobstructed view. I was under the impression that that view was protected, as people who move here and buy houses are. But if this is something that what is, when you buy it, can be changed in a few years and somebody can build a 200-foot tall building in the view, that detracts from your property value. These people's property value in this development that's being built are going to be solid. Ours are going to be impacted. So I would like to ask that you consider that. And when I first got involved in this, I was upset with 195 feet. Now I'm talking 220 feet. Okay. Now, if you start granting those type of waivers, where does that end? Does this become Miami Beach, Puerto Rico? You have a building or apartment building that is just the other side of I-90, just north of Sherman. And I believe Mr. Hagedorn owns that property. I'm not sure. But for development purposes, that property is very old. Why not just do the same thing, take one of these buildings and build it there, and you'll completely obliterate people's views. All they'll do is look right into a building. So where does it end? I mean, is that feasible? People buying up properties in Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, California, they have what they call mansionizing. And what people did, they built a movie studio there, and here's this 1930s little stucco terracotta roof single-family homes, and people started buying 4 and 5 and 6 of them and building a 70 or 7,000 square foot mansion, a 5,000 square foot mansion. Completely destroyed the neighborhood. It was no longer a beach thing, it was a rich guy thing. So, like I say, they're talking about a filtered view, okay, instead of the view we have now. And I say, if it was a hospital or something, it might make more sense, but a for-profit enterprise, all the people on that ridge are giving up their view. The pictures that you're seeing here, I'm not an engineer, I can't tell you that they're to scale or they're not to scale, but using the little building that was just built, the 5-story building that they referenced in their pictures, that's about 60 feet. It's a 5-story building. I'm calculating about 60 feet. Well, these buildings that they're proposing to build are 3.5 times that height. So if you project that, I tried to do it on my computer, but I don't have those skills. It looks to me like it's going to cut off a pretty good chunk of the lake. In my right-hand view, as I say, when you have people over here, it comes over and it takes up more of their view. So it's late, and that's my piece. I hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hillary, do you have anyone?
We do. We have another one. So we have Katie Elwell on Zoom that would
Okay.
like to speak and ask some questions. So we just need to give her talking privileges.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Katie.
You guys,
I
this
just
is a
need.
good presentation, my first one I've ever sat in on.
Can you hear me, Katie?
Yes,
I just need to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes.
All right, go right ahead. Thank you for waiting.
No problem. Thank you guys. This is really good presentation. I guess it might be a confusion that I have. In the conclusion under number 4, it talked about bringing a large tax property base to this area. Are they rentals or are they actual condos for sale? And what would be the difference if they're renting versus being property tax owners?
Well, if that's your question, I'm sure that either John or Phil will address that for you later.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's it. I just am confused on if they're renting, is that really a large property tax base?
Okay. Well, I'm sure they'll address that for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you again. That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Well, at this point, either Phil or John?
I have a quick question before I don't interrupt John. But, man, we're not granting any waivers in this, are we?
There are, would it be helpful to pull up that slide that Sean had where it's just kind of asking what's being changed from the previous approval to the limited design PUD? Is that what you mean, or what waivers?
No, the individual came up here, said that we're doing on the heights, we're granting a waiver. And I didn't think we're granting any waiver on the height, are we? I mean, there's no height limit down there.
Correct. C-17 has no height limit.
Yeah, right.
So that's the
there's
zoning.
not this application is not requesting, nor are we finding a waiver of any sort.
Let's see if I can remember which slide this is.
Good luck.
If I can see it. Okay. So this was the original approval for site number 4. The building height that they had at the time was 43 3/4 feet in the C-17 zone for multifamily use, and that was changed up to 60 feet or an elevation of 2,200 in the approval in 2004. That was.
So what we're not asking, we are not giving a waiver, we're modifying the height.
Well,
I mean,
we're modifying something that was
the limited
approved
design
before.
PUD allows them to ask for those changes in setbacks and height, just like any other PUD. So when we get a PUD request for a reduction in parking or a driveway length that's shorter than 20 feet, they want 18 feet, or a rear yard at 10 feet instead of 25, those dimensional standards are what a PUD can request changes to.
So it's a change to a previous PUD iteration, but it's not a change to city code, correct?
Correct. So and to be perfectly clear here, the way that city code works in C-17 is based on percentage. So what is the principal use of the site? And the principal use of the site is determined based on floor area. And so if they built 51% of the floor area as a hotel, C-17 would have no height limit. They could build one building as tall as they wanted, or 5 buildings as tall as they wanted. If it's under 51% and it's residential in scope, then the maximum height currently would be 45 feet. But they had already requested to get to 60, which is very similar to like an R34 standard. Now, they haven't determined exactly yet what that makeup will be as far as percentage. And so they're requesting that height with the idea that, hey, we got to do some market study here and figure out what that percentage will be.
but that's not a waiver.
Define.
It's not a waiver.
That's
They're basically,
very
they're,
critical. We had one here a year ago down here. We had a big brouhaha on people were complaining about views being taken and so forth. And well, it's not a waiver, and that to me is a very significant item.
It wouldn't be a waiver, and I guess to protect views, you would need like a view easement or something that would prevent someone from building in someone's view. And we saw that come to bear. We saw that come to bear over at One Lakeside. You know, there was a bunch of people that were not happy that a building was going up right in front of them, but they didn't have rights to those views.
And that's my point, is there are processes and procedures, and I believe they're being followed here, that there's not waivers, there's standards and laws and so forth.
Oh, certainly, yeah, and we covered that in C-17, the C-17 code, and it's on page 8. And it defines exactly what's allowed in C-17. You're welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
Are there any other questions?
Phil, John, do you want to address any of the questions that came up before I close public testimony?
Sure, I'd be
on
happy
this?
to, thank you. First, as a Katie, the property tax is determined on the assessed value of the building. And if it's a condo or an apartment, it's not who owns it, it's how much is it worth. And so somebody's paying the property tax. In a condo, it's mostly the people that own it. In an apartment, it's the landlord. But the Kootenai County Treasurer gets the money either way, and it would be the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that hopefully answers her question. I respect Jim's comment on the view. In 1990, I bought 4 acres on Fernand Hill Road, 3403. And I bought that piece because it was the highest piece of land at that time in the city of Coeur d'Alene. And I could see the resort that I'd built. It was really special to me. And I could see the golf course that I built. And all the adjacent land that was in that subdivision that I helped create, I got a view easement. And sometime thereafter, they built McEwen Tower right in front of the resort, and Parkview blocked the rest of it. That's just what happens when a community grows. And the trees along Fernand Hill grew, and I no longer saw the golf course. So I respect that a view, you buy something for the view, as I did, and I tried to protect it, which I did for the first 400 feet, but that was the end of that because Coeur d'Alene grew. And so and then the other thing that Commissioner Liptrip mentioned is as C-17, if we went hotel of at least 51%, there is no height limitation on any of the property. And the setback is minimal. So what this really does for you is it puts a height limitation on this property, as opposed to, and it also gives you control over pitched roofs and stepped roofs. And so that's a control that you have, that if we decide to stay C-17 and we don't do the PUD, we could build whatever and meet the zoning. So it's actually a protection to the city and to those that have a view obstruction. I believe that's correct. So, any thoughts or questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
We're good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this particular hearing and bring it to the commissioners for some discussion and then hopefully a motion.
I'd second what Commissioner Luttrop said about, the presentation was extremely well done, and I think the effort that went in with the visual studies and just addressing each and every one of those comp plan elements, it gets a little, long, but it kind of does the job of us up here in a sense. It makes it pretty clear that the findings are met. At the end of the day, that's what has to happen here, is the findings have to be met. Whether we like the project or dislike it or whatever, are the findings met? In my belief, They clearly are. You've demonstrated that, thoroughly. That said, beyond the findings, to me, it comes down to really 4 things that make this a home run project for the city of Coeur d'Alene. And the first is that it helps the East Sherman study area. This is a spark that's going to, ignite further development, just like the resort supports downtown. This is going to support it coming the other way, down Sherman the other way. Number one. Number two, I see this as really heavily buffered, all those trees in there and whatnot. Where else in this city can you put 275 units of stuff and it be, in my mind, minimal or no impact to any surrounding neighbors? Shot to East Sherman. 2 is the how well it's buffered and impact to those around it. And as Mr. Barlow, I think, really hit, this, as you did too, Phil, is, this is a real win to the city and the schools, and, this is a low impact project. This isn't going to be where the police go every night. There's no roads that we have to plow. The city services are already in there. All of the infrastructure is there. That needs to be extended or modified is going to be at applicant expense. So, this is a real win in terms of, tax base without impact to the city. That frankly, like you say, city can take that money that instead of plowing the roads that would have been in the big acreage to get the number, they can use that money in cool things, and so that's the third thing. And then I'd say the fourth thing is a positive in my mind. And Mr. Barlow, you had 9 items on your benefits slide. I'd say there's 10, and that is, this I think this little public park thing. I didn't see that on the slide, but I think that small but pretty cool little amenity, I think, that reflects, I think, the historic. That used to be the Lamplighter Motel down there, if anybody remembers. And you probably knocked it down or whatever. It needed to go away. But I think that's a pretty cool amenity in all of this, is that little preservation, in my mind, of that's a real plus too. So I'm in support.
Thank you. Any other comment? Well, I would just add to that it's going to increase the values in East Sherman and hopefully kickstart. We've been doing it for so long, and Hillary's been working on East Sherman to get it, jump started. This is just going to add, hopefully, for other people like yourselves to come in and develop. And I think it's going to help the other side of the street, which is in Fernan. I think we're going to see some sort of other projects down that way, because it's going to take people like yourselves and developers to step forward and make this commitment to the city to do what you're going to do whenever that time frame might be. We've already have one development down there that I believe is successful. There's a little coffee shop down there. I drive down there. There are people sitting in the coffee shop years ago you've never seen. Michael Dees has been down there for a very long time, and he's doing a great business. There's a little Mexican restaurant, I believe, that opened up down there. So there is going to be more life in that area thanks to developers like yourselves. I think it's a great project, as John said. That little fishing pier, which I don't think we have one in the city someplace, that someone can go in there and enjoy that. So I thank you again for that. So I think this is a great project, and I would approve this if I was voting, and let's see where it goes.
It's all been said.
Motion, anyone? John, go right ahead.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
It's lengthy. I'll go through it as quickly as I can get away with over here.
I know I always put you on the spot.
But it is a little verbose, so bear with me, but I'll read fast. So this is a motion in the form of walking through the findings one more time very quickly. limited design PUD-2-04M.1. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on September 8th, 2020, and there being present a person requesting approval of item LDPUD-2-04M.1, a request for a modification of a portion of a limited design planned unit development, including addition of 2.4 acres to the limited design PUD, dedication of 0.31 acres of public open space with improvements, and a request to increase total footprints and height for site number 4. Applicant being Hegadon Hospitality Company. Location is a portion of the northeast corner of Coeur d'Alene Resort Golf Course in conjunction with 319 East Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, known as the Old Campground. Findings, motion that we accept findings B1 through B7, statements of fact as presented in the finding worksheet. Adopt finding B8, that pursuant to section 17.07.275, limited design planned unit development review criteria. A planned unit development may be approved only if the proposal conforms to the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. Those findings being B8A, that the proposal does provide a functional, enduring, and desirable environment, and that is based on the staff report presented, the applicant's illustrations presented, and the testimony that we have provided that a functional and enduring and desirable environment would be achieved. B8B, that the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, that as presented, the testimony and the applicant's exhibits illustrate that each and every one of the comp plan objectives have been addressed to the satisfaction of meeting the intent of the comp plan. B8C, that the building envelope is compatible with and sufficiently buffered from uses on adjacent properties. The design elements presented, including the building heights, along with stepped and sloped roofs, the setbacks between buildings, the breakup, kind of the mass, illustrate that the design elements are compatible. B8D, the proposal is compatible with natural features of the site and adjoining properties, that applicant's testimony and exhibits and illustrations have allowed us to conclude that the topography, native vegetation, wildlife habitats, and water courses, preservation of trees and waterways have been adequately addressed, as well as viewscapes have been as best as possible preserved. B8E, the proposal does provide adequate common open space area as determined by the Planning Commission of no less than 10% of gross area of land, free of buildings, streets, driveways, and parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. This finding is based on the fact of the exhibits and the testimony that we have 82% open space, 137 acres, as well as 1.38 acres of open space dedicated to the residents of this development, some of which 0.31 acres would be open to the public. B8F, finding that the location and design of the project building envelope is such that the traffic generated by the development can be accommodated safely on arterials and collector streets without requiring unnecessary utilization of other residential streets. That's based on the applicant's exhibits as well as staff's presentation, specifically on page 43 of the staff report, states that even in the highest or worst case traffic scenario, it would only be a modest increase. Quote, B8G, the proposed setbacks do provide for sufficient emergency vehicle access. That was addressed in page 45 of the staff report by the fire department, that the neighborhood character would be protected by adequate buffering. Those exhibits of the before and after studies of illustrations and photos illustrate that that buffering has more than been achieved, and that the maintenance of any wall exterior from the development's property has been achieved through the perpetual maintenance by the Hagedon Hospitality Corporation. B8H, finding that the proposed building envelope will provide for adequate sunlight, fresh air, and usable space. And that finding would be based on all of the testimony and the exhibits that were presented, and illustrate that with the separation of the buildings and the staggering of the pads, et cetera, that sunlight, fresh air would be achieved. And finally, B8I, the proposal ensures that adequate provisions have been made with respect to flood and landscape hazards, and that was addressed in the discussion of Objective 1.17, the hazardous areas setback from the flood designation areas, as we've seen with the exhibits. Order, finally, conclusion and decision. The Planning Commission in this motion would, pursuant to the aforementioned, would find that the request of the Hagedon Hospitality Company for approval of the limited design planned unit development as described in the application should be approved with 16 conditions of record, which I am hoping not to read. That'd be my motion.
Thank you, John. I have a motion, a first.
I'll second the motion.
I have a second. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations, motion passes. And good luck, and thank you. Unless we have some other comments, I would call for.
I'd like to make the motion to adjourn, but I want to take this opportunity that on this East Sherman, John and I have talked in the olden days, when it was a Miracle Mile.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing the miracle come back. With that, I move for adjournment.
Okay, I have a
Well
motion
said.
to adjourn.
Well said.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So passed, we adjourn. Good evening, everyone, and thank you.
Aye.
Good night.